Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So, this is going to be a little bit of a different type of introduction to the video. I'll explain in a moment. So, this is what MSNBC opened the day with here, right? Um, here's American recession here. UK PM convenes emergency security meeting as far right riots spread. So, this is what they're talking about. The crappy Olympics. We'll get into this. I got some stuff to get into about the Olympics later. And how unbelievably crappy this Olympics is. But that's how MSNBC opened their thing here. This is Huffington Post. Kamala camp said sights on Republicans for Harris. Silver stunner. Harris pulls ahead. And so that's how they decide to open this up, right? Olympic boxer calls for end to bullying after backlash over gender misconceptions. So that's the liberal media. Here's New York Post, which is far more of a far right nightmare. Underground, 2 female tourists shoved onto New York City subway. And Wall Street braces for bloodbath as Dow Nasdaq futures plunges following Japan meltdown, stoking U.S. fears. So that's the third story on New York Post. But they're missing out on a lot of stuff here, right? Burying it all, RFK Jr. says he dumped a dead bear in Central Park after ditching plans to skin it in a bizarre video with Roseanne Barr. So there's that. But this is what the story should have been. The Asian economy, stocks routed in Asia, tumble as Europe markets fear U.S. recession in wake of weaker than expected jobs report. U.S. stock futures slump, Asia stocks routed amid recession fears. Asian stock-eyed losses as a U.S. economy fears deepen market wrap. And so Japanese stocks crash in biggest one-day drop ever as global market routes. So in Japan and in Europe and in England, the stock market plunged there. And this is what happened, remember, before the 2008 collapse, this is what happened. It had to do with derivatives. And so the derivatives market, which Trump deregulated everything, there'd be a time when this would happen. As soon as Trump deregulated everything, because he's a shill for the banksters, this was inevitable. Like this is, Trump issue. Of course, Biden did all these things with bailouts and, inflation and global inflation and of course inflation in America. And there's no way to print their way out of this thing. And so there's a tweet last night that just popped up on my phone, and somebody tweeted, "It will wake up tomorrow to a U.S. Stock market collapse," and that's going to be happening in the next couple of days, right? But then there's what's going on in England, and so it says here, UK says Musk Civil War inevitable post is unjustified. So Elon Musk said civil war in England was unjustified. Why civil war is unlikely. Downing Street condemns Musk for claims civil war is inevitable in the UK amid far-right riots and attacks, right? So these are the headlines if you search for civil war in the UK. But there's civil war in the UK, right? Who are the far-right groups behind the UK riots? Far-right rioters attack asylum seeker hotels in UK Rotterdam. Travelers warn as UK descends into chaos. English police struggle to hold back far-right rioters from hotel, asylum. Dozens arrested in violent clashes across the country as the government warns rioters. So this is what's happening, right? This is what's going on in various parts of the world. Why the Olympics sucks, and Kamala Harris and Trump are fake, lightweight, non-existent politicians that can't solve anything, right? So this is Monday, August 5th. This video will be up tomorrow. I'm just going to do a brief introduction, voiceover, then I'll get into all this stuff. I got a lot more things to get into. The political nightmare and some JoJo Magoo sighting, which we're going to have a lot of them, right? And when the American stock market collapses, it's just a matter of time. because of all of these things. And of course, this is going to assure a Trump presidency because an economic collapse with JoJo Magoo at the helm and Kamala Harris having to answer tough questions as the media turns on her, even though they don't want to, and then all the other things that go with it, right? And so this is exactly the way that everything played out in 2008, because this is what the derivatives market does. And I'll get into that whole economic thing in a bit. So yesterday I did 4 talks about religion, 2 of which will be at the end of this video, and then 2 that will be following this introduction. And, it's the religion failure that leads to the kind of morality we have now. It's always the failure of the religion. It's not people who leave the religion or evil people that create immoral failures in morality. It's when the religion doesn't do what it's supposed to do, which is help people connect to God. When a religion does the opposite of that, and that's what our religion, Christianity, has done, the Western religion and all the other religions at this point have failed, and because religions always fail, because they are money-making power organizations. We're in a materialistic time, and the religions have become materialistic instead of spiritual, right? And that's what happens. And I'll get into that in these talks and, whatever, coming up. But in terms of what you're seeing out there, like this is the beginning of the inevitable collapse that'll happen. And there'll be phases and remissions and up and down and all these things. But we've entered into that phase. And it's, we're at the prequel to the phase, the introduction to the phase, right? And our lifestyle is, taking a hit to whatever extent, right? Due to inflation. And people are scared. But it's not like registered yet. But I just want to say this. There are a lot of truthers out there. And again, I don't listen to them, but I know from the comments and just in general. And of course, the truth community has been cleansed of, I don't want to say cleansed because, there are a lot of good truthers that are, have been forced out or just gave up because of the whole, everything that happened with the censorship and all these things, right? But the people out there that are truthers that are either lying to you or lying to themselves or both, and have been telling you that there's a way to fix this thing and save our system that shouldn't be saved, right? You have truthers that every day, and I'm talking about the whole spectrum of truthers, people who don't buy into the official system, the official story. They don't believe the official story, the BS story that's being told to them, right? That's what I'm calling a truther here. So it's a wide variety of people. That includes the QBs, that includes the woke people, right? Includes the, all the people who are disgruntled and don't believe in that they're being told the truth, believe that they're being lied to, right? So all those people, like that's what I'm, a big tent of what I'm calling truthers here. And all those people who report on the bad things that are happening in our system, right? The things that are going wrong with our system. And, it's extensive. And then you have people who are truthers, more truthers. And they report about all of it, right? And the collapse of the moral situation is the biggest part. The collapse of the human beings, where human beings are, weak and pathetic, right? Human beings are selfish and entitled, disconnected from God, the breakdown of the family, make poor moral decisions, are filled with just gross things that they do, right? In terms of their habits, video games and porn and, all the things that they indulge in terms of drugs and, all the things, right? Where it becomes a decadent society of just self-indulgence and stimulation and nothing to do with character formation and connecting to God and, hard work and, being in tune with nature or whatever it is, right? When human beings collapse and civilization collapses and our system and the human beings are going in the same direction, and that is towards the demonic side of things, right? Towards the egoistic potential demon that exists in each person, away from the potential saint, the soul that exists in each person, right? So that's where we are. And people report on this all the time, across the board. And both sides are saying that we're fighting for the soul of America, fighting for the soul of, fighting for democracy, whatever. Like, it's that bad. There's complete division, which is another thing, right? I mean, this is like a big divorce that's going on globally, where the conservatives and the liberals are at war with each other, so it's blaming everything on the other party, of the other people. And that's what's being reported by people in the so-called alternative media on a daily basis. And yet they all pretend that the system can be saved by frickin' Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you think either one of those two dopes is going to save you? Like, are you, like, insane, right? Like, we think those two people and those two parties that have been just growing more and more sucky. I mean, the suck is just, palpable. It's like you can cut it with a knife. And humanity just sucks right now. People are just getting worse. Like, people and then the leaders and everything. Like, it's just, we're diving into the abyss, and you think the system can be saved? You think it should be saved, right? Like, why would you even think it should be saved? I know why I want it to be saved and why you want it to be saved, because we're dependent on it. I say this all the time. We're 100% on a system that should collapse because it's immoral and it's taking everybody in the wrong direction. And people are going in the wrong direction, so we need something different. And we don't have a backup plan. We don't have a plan B. We don't have a system that can, there's no tweaks to the system. We're all going in the wrong frickin' direction, right? You're going in the wrong direction. We all are. And so any truther out there is telling you that the system should and can be saved is a shill and a liar and self-deceiving. Most people are, it's just wishful thinking on their part. But it's, they're just wasting your time, right? Because, you're waiting for some Hail Mary thing that's not going to happen. And so, like, it's not happening. There's no saving this thing. And, we're heading into it. And the more you head into it, the more you realize you better start coming up with a plan B. And I don't advocate that people go and live in the woods and, stupid stuff, like the overreaction, right? But at least, start preparing yourself for the inevitable, and connecting to God internally is paramount. Throwing off the shackles of your remedial religion and your indoctrination and finding a way to connect to God directly. There's a Gratefulness meditation channel that I have that helps people do that. It's free. There's no, it just has a bunch of videos and how you do it. And so the old Sahaj Marg method, which for me has always been the solution. Connecting to God internally, and there's a system and method to help people do that. But other than that, people can prepare in whatever possible way, right? Putting away, whatever it is. Like, you can figure out prepping, whatever each person has to come up with their own plan. I'm not advocating, I'm not recommending anything. I'm saying, like, the writing's on the frickin' wall. You saw what happened when COVID hit, and it can happen that quickly. And there'll be a day where you'll be like, oh my God, it's chaos. And people revert to fear and immediate survival. Like, instead of thinking about the bigger picture, politically and, economically or whatever, it's just like, how am I going to get through today? How am I going to get through this week, right? And, we've entered into this phase. My wife and I watched the movie Civil War last night. And it's really an epic movie. It's well done. And, graphically depicts what's going to happen to America, one view of it, as it descends into civil war. It takes place in, I guess in right now some period where there's the Civil War has already started. There's there's military, where groups of the military have turned on the American system and government. Some coming out of California, some coming out of Texas, and they're coming across to the country to Washington, D.C. And these photojournalists are capturing all of it. And just the imagery and just seeing what's happening and, the violent aspect of it and how as America descends into this, chaos. And it's, it's there, like it's there for people to see. Just this idea of what could happen to America and what will happen inevitably, because America is going to descend into civil war because the other countries are being affected by America's inflation. And that's tumbling the global economy. And then this, things are going to happen, right? And as people don't have the same level of services and don't have the same level of lifestyle, that's going to happen, right? And so that's where we are. Like that's, the inevitable of this stuff that's going to happen. And we're coming up to it, right? And so, you know, like there's great images of the Capitol being bombarded, the Capitol building, and these things in this movie, and all these things are things that you don't see, like where there's no happy ending, right? There's no positive ending. There's no feel good ending in the movie because we're heading into that time. There's no rescue. There's no something being redeemed. It's just the end of something, right? And we're facing the end of something. We're coming to the end of something. Our way of life, the paradigm shift, the country itself, the economy, all these things. We're coming to ends of, the whole thing, like everything, the last Olympics, which I covered in my last video. Okay, so let me get into the spiritual stuff here because it's really important, and then I will come back with a JoJo Magoo update and some of these other things, and I'll end with more talk about the economy and then more spiritual stuff. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. I gave what I consider an epic voiceover this morning to do with some, things about Christianity. And the voice is coming over. Truth or stuff about Christianity and the nature of religion and God and these things, which I talked about in the past. But this is, different than other things that I've said. But there's one caveat here, and I'm not totally sure what caveat means, but I believe I'm using it in the right way here. But there's one thing I want to say, sort of a disclaimer. In the Sajmark tradition, there's four masters of the system, right? In the first Skyology, there was no organization, there was no method like we have now that we do, the people who do the system. And the guy lived in this place called Fatagar in northern India. Very rural, poor, not great place, right? The worst place. India is not as nice as America in terms of the, everything. The material. I mean, spiritually it's great, but there's some beautiful material things there, but, most of it's just dirty and overpopulated and, beautiful country. It has its own, every country has its natural beauty and it has its spiritual beauty, these ashrams and spiritual places and the essence of India, the condition, the feeling there is superior to America and much more mature and, it's easier to connect to God there. But on a material level, it's a pit, right? And the third master of the system, Master Charji, said, I went to Shah Jahanpur where he met Babaji, the second master. He said, I didn't think there was a worse place than Shah Jahanpur. And then I went to Fatagar, right? And so it was a not nice place, right? Full of criminals and, just rural and whatever. And, northern India isn't known for its higher level consciousness and spirituality. But this guy, Lalaji, was there and he didn't have like what we consider any sort of organization. And, he was just there. People would come to his house and he would impart spiritual teachings to them. And he wrote all these different essays. He didn't write any like real books or anything. And eventually he had a successor named Babaji that created the whole like, the method that we now use and then the organization made it an organized thing, registered in countries, right? And his family didn't turn over his writings. They stole them and hid them away and didn't share them with everybody else, which is, kind of a dickish thing to do, but it happened, right? And so there wasn't very much in terms of what he said in his teachings. But one thing he said is never criticize anybody's religion. And the reason he said that is because there's lots of people, the religion that they're doing is the most they could do. That's the best they could do. They don't have the ability to jump to the next level. And so if you criticize what they're doing and they see the criticism as being legitimate, they might lose faith or heart in it or whatever. So you have to be careful when talking about something that's better to something that's inferior, because the inferior thing is all that people can do, right? And so for some years, I didn't talk about the stuff I knew about Christianity. And I have somebody who's transcended my own Christian upbringing to do something higher and better. And I'll explain that in a moment here, right? In terms of what Jesus did. That's what Jesus' example, I talk about that in this upcoming voiceover. Jesus transcended Judaism. He was born a Jew, and then he became a spiritual person connected to God directly, right? And that's what I'm referring to here. And so there's a higher and a lower. And to understand the higher and the lower, think about like going to get your car fixed, right? So you go in and you have money, you've made money, whatever, you have your job or whatever it is. You go and drop off the car and they fix the car, right? Now, the mechanic has the higher and you have the lower. You're dependent on the mechanic, right? And so this is the difference in giving a man a fish or teaching him how to fish, right? And that's what I'm doing here in this upcoming voiceover. That's what I'm addressing here. Because on the spiritual level, on the religious level, religious people have outsourced their connection to God. You have a responsibility, and it's supposed to be, every person's supposed to do this, where you have an internal connection to the divinity within you. Now, people don't have the ability to do that. People have varying abilities to do that in terms of their maturity, in terms of their ability for abstract thought, in terms of their consciousness, right? But everybody has the natural inclination to connect to divinity within them. It's what separates us from animal life, and it separates people from other people. Like it's a like there's an evolved group of people that have the ability to do that, or are exercising that ability to do that, who are working on this, who have embraced this part of their soul's journey. Because connecting to God directly is the difference between teaching a man to fish or giving him a fish. So when you go to your religion and you sit there in the what we used to call the pews in the Catholic religion, or whatever you call it, in your religion, whatever your synagogue, or the Christian religions, or any of these things, and the temples or whatever, where you're sitting there listening to some guy pontificate and tell you what's up, and interpret your connection to God through some book like they do in Christianity, as opposed to connecting to God directly. The person who's connecting to God directly, it's like being able to, prepare food. It's going to a restaurant and having somebody prepare food for you, and you cooking your food yourself. When you cook your food yourself, you're more, I don't want to say empowered because I don't like that word, but empowered, and you're more knowledgeable, right? The person who's cooking the food knows more than the person who's just sitting there receiving it, right? Anything that you do where you go to somebody and they give you a service and you don't know how to do it, right? You get your computer fixed, like you ask your children to help you figure out a bug on your computer or help you set up your phone, right? It's the person who knows how to do that is on a higher level in that arena or that area, right? Like going back to fixing a car, right? Doesn't mean your mechanic is more evolved than you, but in terms of fixing a car, they know more about fixing a car than you do, right? They know more about that than you do. So when you go and you sit there and you listen to somebody pontificate and to explain to you what God is all about through talking about the Bible and the case of Christianity, you're sitting there in an inferior position, right? Because they are connecting to the Bible directly and you're listening to their interpretation. It's the same thing about coming here and listening to what I have to say. But then there's critical thinking skills, and you're developing your own ability to decipher and determine what's going on, right? So you go to a teacher, you go to somebody to help you learn how to do something that they know how to do, right? And in the best case scenario, you exceed them. You go farther than they went, right? In the world of spirituality, you're connecting to God directly instead of having a middleman of your religion and the book, the Bible in this case, that defines your understanding of the divinity within you and the divinity everywhere, understanding of God, right? And so you connecting directly to God, and maybe you need the books at first, and maybe you need the pastor at first. Of course you do. You need somebody, but you reach a level where you're like, all right, I'm going to connect to God directly. And that's what the Sajmark system helps people do. Through meditation and cleaning out everything that blocks your connection to God, and then receiving this divine energy, which is transmission, the essence of God, that you receive in your heart, and you can feel God's love. And you can have an actual experience of God, and then you work towards having a relationship with God. So that's a superior thing. It's a higher thing than a religion. And I know it to be so. Because I've experienced, I've had this experience, and if you're still doing a religion, you haven't. And I've been doing it now for 31 years, right? And so I've had that knowledge, and I didn't know what to do with it, right? Like I talked about, at first I didn't really, I talked about it in very vague terms when I first had this YouTube channel. Of course, I was not as good as I am now. I wasn't, I'm better now than I was then, right? And so, with this idea, I don't want to have anybody who can't do it, lose. And I'm not trying to criticize your religion, because I'm not. I'm saying there's something higher and better, which is a spiritual life. And that those who can do it need to do it, right? And many of you can do it, you just don't want to, or you're scared to, or whatever. And so that is what it is. But it's my duty to at least put that information out there, because you're being told bullshit lies from people over and over again, indoctrinated by this system that is warped and been, the religious system and our, everything else, right? It's the same thing I do with everything else. See through the bullshit and explain it, how they're doing it, how they're the games that they're running. And there's reasons I have the ability to do that because of my past lives as being one of these guys, like one of these bad kings. I had a life like this. So I see their scams because I pulled the same bullshit in a previous existence, right? And have since rejected it in my, spiritual journey, my path that I've gone through. And so there's ways that I can see it from both sides, from the higher side of doing a spiritual journey and from the lower side of being engaged in the crap and the controlled system that's now being run on all these people, right? And so that's one of the, from past experiences, I have insight because of that, and being dyslexic and these other things, right? But, inevitably, people being able to do it for themselves is always the goal. And especially with your connection to God. And the Sajmark system of meditation, or gratefulness meditation we do, facilitates that connection. And so I'm going to say things that, it's people are always telling me you're doing it wrong and you don't see it. And I'm like, no, I'm doing something that's higher than what you're doing. Not that I'm bragging or trying to be superior. There's a higher and a lower, right? I said this great quote by the third master of the Sajmark system. The lowest of the higher is still higher than the highest of the lower, right? So the highest level of the material world or the religious world, the highest you can attain from being in a religion, or which is a materialistic thing, or being rich and famous and powerful, is still lower than the person who's just stepping onto the spiritual field and just becoming a spiritual person and forming a direct contact with spirit, with the divinity within them, and having an interpersonal relationship. That's always the higher, right? Because now you are connected to God directly, and you start to know God. You start to commune with God. You start to have a relationship with God. And that's superior to somebody sitting in some religious, place of worship being told about God and, on an intellectual level and told what to do and what not to do. And, all these things where you start knowing it directly. And so that's what I'm providing here. But it's the best thing of Jesus' example. And it's extraordinarily valuable. It's more valuable than any other bullshit that you hear anywhere else or even on my channel, in terms of being able to understand that you can connect to God directly, and connecting to God directly and finding God within yourself is the biggest gift that I've been given in my life. Like, it's far superior to anything else, right? Like, it's just, it's transformational. And it's what Jesus did. Like, Jesus went from being a religious person to being a spiritual person. And that's the example that Jesus set for people. Not all this bullshit about, him being the only son of God and all this stuff, dying for your sins and things that I get into here. And so if you don't want to hear it, if you're too fragile, and again, I'm not trying to force this on you. I'm not forcing it on you, right? I'm just explaining the knowledge, or explaining this concept that you've never heard before. Because they're certainly not going to tell you in your religion, and they're not going to tell you in your government, because they don't want people to connect to God directly. Because once you connect to God directly, all of these systems lose power over you. I mean, they still have, some level of material power, but in terms of they can't control you and can't control your thoughts and you're going to see through their bullshit because you're connected to God directly, and you've risen to a higher level, higher than they're on. Your ability to understand reality and your conceptualize things is higher than these people who are running this material, corrupt system, right? And most people, even religious people, are at a higher level of consciousness than they are, right? Even lower level religious people. And so I'm saying all this. I'm going to put one image here, probably of a path. I have these pictures of paths. I'll find one of the path. And, if you want to skip through this, then just skip through the path, right? If you're a Christian person who can't hear this. But in terms of, like, hearing a different interpretation of reality is what trutherism is about, what being a truther is. Understanding a different narrative. And I have a different narrative. You might not agree with it, but it shouldn't threaten you, because if you're doing the right thing, it's not threatening. But if you're following some bullshit thing, right, and you don't understand what's really going on, and then but you're so indoctrinated that it's just like waking up to anything, right? And so for those Christians who have the ability to do what Jesus did and go beyond, transcend his religion, and become a spiritual person, which is the higher, then that's what I provide here. And it's an unusual gift that's underappreciated because people don't even know what that is. The immense gift it is to jump from one level of consciousness to another. And in terms of the spiritual, connecting to God directly. Because think about what it's like to be a truther, and it's harder, reading the ingredients, all the things I talk about. Yeah, sure, it's harder. It's more difficult, and I get into that in this voiceover. But it's a profound, evolutionary step when you no longer believe the bullshit you're being presented by the powers that be, and then you're able to use your critical thinking skills and your, your honed consciousness to interpret reality for yourself instead of listening to some CNN person tell you what's up and this is what's happening and, all these things. I mean, you see that you're on a higher level than a sheeple. Well, a spiritual person is on a much higher level than a religious person. The religious person is the sheeple, times 1,000 in terms of someone who connects to God directly. And that's the kind of gift that is to understand, and the Sajma Gratefulness meditation system is in helping people to form that direct connection to the divinity within them. It's revolutionary. It's the next evolutionary step of the human race. And I can't undersell it, right? I can't, I can't oversell it. I can't express, I can't put into words how big of a movement this is and how much of a gift it is, an opportunity is for people. And I'm not selling it because it's not mine to sell, right? And it's not, but I'm saying I can't overstate it. I can't, say it more than it actually is. And it's for people to experience, right? It's not like taking my word for it. When you experience the transformation of finding the divinity within you, as opposed to sitting there, just being told what God is by some bullshit religion, it's a profound. It's like the greatest leap that you could ever possibly make in your evolutionary movement, and you're becoming something. So that's what this is about. So I just wanted to preface this talk that I'm about to give with that. I'm going to put this in my Journey Series 154 as well. And so without further ado, here it is. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So this comes under the category, I doubt you'll hear this anywhere else. So I'm going to open with this in terms of the Trump connection to being a false prophet and Christians thinking he's the second coming of Jesus, and thinking he's saintly, and him using this divine providence for a fake event that is so easily exposed. And there is I covered these comments briefly on the end of my last video, but I have something more profound to say about it here. So let's get to the first comment. And this is to Trump takes off his Band-Aid, surprise, Trump in Israel, and he's touching the Wailing Wall. And Kamala is hilarious, something or other. It got cut off the title. You reject the true Jesus. Oh man, so much truth, but most important part you reject. The spirit is in the blood, And only Jesus has the perfect sinless spirit. That's why his blood is the only way. Our spirit is made perfect through him. Only one way, God bless. Um, I don't reject the true Jesus. You reject the true Jesus because you're not following the true Jesus, right? The Jesus that you have been given in your religion, starting with what began and became the Catholic Church, and all the stories about Jesus and all the claims about him were manufactured by evil people, which is what happens to every religion. Like every religion, people realize the power of the religion and what, if they usurp Jesus, if they create Jesus, in a sense, their image of what they want Jesus to be or what they think you need Jesus to be, so they can use that to control you, right? And so the Bible has been distorted, and then the teachings of the Bible and the way that the religions have gone have been distorted. I mean, think about this, right? There are people in West Virginia that worship Jesus by holding rattlesnakes, holding copperheads and poisonous snakes, and dancing around. And there are some liberal journalists, some like uppity liberal journalists, that went to cover these people, right? Like he's totally liberal, doesn't really even believe in Jesus. He might even been like Jewish or something, or an atheist, I think he was. And before you know it, he was dancing around with rattlesnakes. Like the guy got sucked in, right? And so that has, there's no rattlesnakes where Jesus was, and that religion, that part of that religion is, and that's just one example of it, right? And you have Mormonisms that claim Mormonism, the Mormon religion, that claims that they found secret scrolls from Jesus in the middle of the desert, right? And so people make up shit all the time. And when they do it to benefit themselves and to enslave the parishioners, the people, then they've created a false, narrative, and you don't know the real Jesus because you're getting Jesus from scammers like people like Trump who take advantage of your, desire to connect to God. Everyone has an internal compulsion to connect to God. There's some sort of craving within yourself that wants you to connect to God, right? And so you don't know the true Jesus because you're worshiping a religious book and a set of teachings and a bunch of distorted, either made up teachings or teachings that have been erased. And, Jesus believed in reincarnation, clearly talked about it, talked about his past lives. It's there in the what's it called? The Gnostic Gospel, I think it's called. These texts that were found, another bunch of teachings that may or may not be real, but they were found out somewhere that come from a different strain of the disciples of Jesus, right? The whole Bible was written by his disciples, so his disciples were not pure vessels for Jesus' message. That's why the books of the Bible are all different, right? They have different accounts because they're written by different people, right? The gospel according to Matthew, the gospel according to Paul. Paul didn't even know. Paul never met Jesus, but some of his teachings are the best ones in the book, right? Like his, he had an intercommune with God directly. But either way, the teachings have been distorted, so you don't know the real Jesus. You haven't connected with the real essence of Jesus and don't know his true teachings and don't know who he was as a person because it's all now lies and deceptions, and they've edited out things, and they've focused on some things and then more than others. Because look at the deal that they've gotten, and it specifically surrounds the idea of John 3:16, that Jesus is the only path to heaven. And so they're saying that any religious practice before Jesus, anything, even Judaism and things like this, all these religions, you can't find God or connect to God. And you're doomed to die and go to hell. I mean, you're going to die and you're doomed to go to hell. Everybody, before Jesus was here. Like, Jesus came to save everybody. And after Jesus, there's never going to be another person. So this is this one opportunity. And only through this religion, now you have to pay money to them, you have to support them, listen to them when they tell you who to vote for, all these things. When the religion comes, and manages your existence, and that you have to adhere to this religion. But you don't have to really do anything yourself. You don't have to connect to God. In fact, don't connect to God. You can't connect to God directly because you're a worthless piece of shit sinner, right? So don't even try to do that directly because you can't. You're not like Jesus, who's the only person that connect to God. And that you accept Jesus, surrender to Jesus, and these things, and you're going to heaven. That's all you have to do. And not even be a good person. You can do it on your deathbed, and just there's nothing you really have to do. I mean, that's what they're telling you. But as long as you pay money and you're an obedient Christian and things, and so they've created this idea that this is the only path to heaven and everyone else is going to hell, which means anything you do to these people, other people outside of the religion, is okay, right? So let's come back to that. You can go and, conquer them and force them into your religion. It's okay to do that. And that's complete BS. Like, it's just wrong and evil in every possible way. And so they've constructed this narrative. That's your religion, right? That's the Christian religions, and that's how they've used this weapon against other people, other religions, and everyone else is going to hell. So if you go and do anything you do to them to save them, as long as you force them to convert to Christianity, they're going to be saved, even if it's forced and they don't want to do it. Even if it's at sword point, and violence is okay. And so there's a bloody history here. So then the person says, the spirit is in the blood, and only Jesus has the perfect sinless spirit. That's why his blood is the only way our spirit is made perfect through him. Only one way. God bless. Okay, so I was talking about how there's so much blood in Christianity. It had to do with Trump's era and then WWF and WWE or whatever. And, this process, what's called stigmata, and blood is such a big part in various places. The blood of Christ. You're supposed to drink his blood when you're having wine. At the Catholic ceremonies they would have. And Catholicism is the original Christian religion, right? So all the Christian religions that you guys practice, whether it be Baptist or Lutheran, right, the King James version of the Bible that most of you guys Christians read, are offshoots of the original religion. They are saying, all right, the original religion got distorted or is wrong, and so we're creating a subset of that religion. We're creating our own group that is somehow better than or purifying the old religion. When you're admitting that there's a failure, there's been a fall. The Catholic Church has fallen, so we have to have our own religion now, right? We have to have an offshoot of that religion. So which one's the right one, right? Like, that's what you have to determine. Some are better than others. Some versions of the Bible are better than others. I don't know which ones, right? I'm not an expert in that, right? But there's got to be one that's the closest to Jesus' teaching, but none of them are. Like, none of them are. First there was a Council of Nicaea that decided, oh, let's just edit out shit of the Bible. Let's just take things out. Let's just say we're not going to talk about the past life things. We're not going to talk about some of these other aspects of the Bible, some of Jesus' story, and we're going to make Jesus into what you now know in John 3:16, the only Son of God. Except that teaching doesn't hold up when Jesus himself calls God our Father, right? People pray, our Father who art in heaven. So how can he be just Jesus' Father and our Father as well? Like, God is in everything and everybody. So if God is a Father, then he's all our fathers. We're all children of God. So there's not one child of God. We all have that potential. Why would God put himself inside of you if you didn't have the potential to realize that part of yourself? Right? Even every animal, every plant, every stone has divinity within them. It has divinity as its center. And so, I mean, doesn't that sound like right? Right? That God has to be in everything and everybody. Either God's in nothing or God's in everything, right? God isn't selective. God is the medium in which everything is created. So you start off with God, medium, like an artist uses oil painting or sculpture or whatever. God is the material that everything in the universe is created from. And you just have grosser forms, of that pure essence, right? So God is spirit, right? So God is the essence of, the essence of love, which is an energy. God is not a person. And that's the other problem. The difference between this idea of monotheism versus polytheism, which is monotheistic, which is one God, right? Mono meaning one, and poly meaning many. So there's only one God, and God is love. But God is an energy and not some dude sitting on some throne somewhere in heaven. God doesn't have an ego. That's one of the brilliant teachings of the Sajmarg system of meditation that I do. One of the breakthrough teachings that God can't have an ego. God can't even have a mind. God can't choose to do the wrong thing. When you have a mind, you make choices. When you have an ego, you make choices. So every one of us has the ability to do something God can't, and that is to do the wrong thing, because we have freedom of choice. Every day we make choices, and there's a plethora, there's infinite amount of wrong choices out there, and there's one right choice. And finding that right choice is what we're supposed to be doing. But we're instead, most of us, indulging in all the wrong choices. And then when we make so many wrong choices, we become so gross and so distorted in our, become an abomination. Our egos become an abomination. We can't even we can't even sniff the right choice. And you see that happen to people all the time, where they get so lost, they can't even, there's nothing in them that can go back and find the real, there's something in them, but it's buried so deep that they can't access it to make the right choices again, right? To find the right choice and actually work towards finding the divine choice. There's always one divine choice, right? But this idea that God is sitting as a man. See, the problem with the Christian religion, it comes from Judaism, which is not a very, every religion presents God as something, right? What is God? God is nature. God is powerful. God is, a man sitting on a throne. God is the sun. God is the moon. God is, the mother nature. The different ways of looking at God, right? As presenting divinity. And the way that the Jewish religion presents God is some egotistical prick sitting on the throne who's judgmental and narcissistic and petty. I mean, think about the way the Old Testament is. Years and years ago, when my ex, we were homeschooling our kids, and she read the Old Testament to my kids, and I sat in on it, and I listened to it, right? And my kids were shocked at the way God was being such a jerk, because that's not how God is. And so that's the problem with that religion. You can see the issues that religion has caused with its own people and then with dealing with other people, because they perceive God as a real a-hole who is narcissistic and petty and jealous. And, think about the way that God's treated. He wants Abraham to sacrifice his only son. I mean, just playing mind games with people. And again, sitting on the throne separate from everybody else. And so God can't have a mind. God can't be, I am, you are. I am God, you are not. I am this, you are not, you are something else, right? In fact, the first fall of a human being, when a human being's ego falls away from God, is when the human being says, I am. I am, I do. And so I am, I do, separate from God. Like, it's not we are, we do. Like, not in the, sense that a person is more than one person, but me and God is a we, right? Me and my soul and God are a we. So the ego, the soul, and God are a we, and we do together, right? My soul, my divinity within me, God, and me together are making decisions. We're creating things, right? But when it's it's the ego. I am, I do. Fuck God, it's me. I'm the doer. I'm the doer, right? As soon as you start thinking you're the doer, you're disconnected from God and all the resources and all the energy and your soul and all these things that go with it. Your ego's acting on its own. I want to do this. I want to do that. I'm the doer. I'm the only one. God, there's no God. I'm the doer. I'm the creator, right? And so that's the first fall. And God can't have that fall because God doesn't have a mind to say, I am. God doesn't have an ego to say, I do. And so God is, which is a brilliant teaching. So God is not some dude sitting on a throne making decisions. Because if you have to make decisions, you're going to make the wrong decision. If you're given freedom of choice, eventually you're going to make some choices that aren't the right choices, right? even the most divine person, the most saintly person, is going to experience making wrong choices. And so only a surrendered person who surrenders completely to God makes the right choices every time. And there's, a process to go through that, right? And there's the big choices and the little choices. But God doesn't have the freedom to make the wrong choice. God can't make the wrong choice. God has to be automatic. There can't be any thought. There can't be any, there can't be any hand wringing for God. God can't sit there and ponder the various choices. God just has to make the right choice automatically every time. So God has to be automatic, so can't have a mind or an ego. So this stupid idea that God's sitting on the throne separate from everything and everybody, judging people, and saying, all right, this person, bring this person before me. There's no distance between you and God. God is inside your heart all the time. God's with you. It's all around you. God's all around you everywhere and everything. And the center of everything is divinity or divine. And so this teaching that God's sitting there, so there's, a monotheistic view of God, but it's as a person, because in the Jewish Bible it says God created man in his image. And so people think God is well, that's really about test tubes. That's about higher developed souls that created, now higher developed human form of human life that created, test tube, part A, part human, well, whatever it is that we are here now. So that, I'm just throwing that out there, but that's where that comes from. What they viewed as God was these alien beings. But in terms of this idea that God created you in his image, it's your soul, not you as a person. God's soul, your soul is the essence of God in its purest abstract form. But most people can't understand that. They can't worship God or connect to God in an etheric form. And so they need a man, or they need a idol, they need a stone, they need something, because they're too gross and too underdeveloped to understand. We're all struggle with the abstract idea of God. God is the essence of love. But that's the real God. And so all these religions are, they've come down to people's level and try to teach them at their level, eventually hoping that people rise up to higher understanding, deeper understanding of the essence and nature of God. So it's the essence of spirit that's important, not blood. What the fuck you talking about blood, right? Blood is a physical thing. Blood is not there's no manifestation of blood. Yeah, sure, a divine person's blood, a person that's realized soul, that's reached the pinnacle of their spiritual evolution, or even just a saint, a lower developed soul that's just starting spirituality, their blood is going to be affected by their all the atoms of your body, your physical body, are going to be divinized by becoming a saintly person. So the more you practice spirituality, you become divine. But it's still, your physical form is grosser, right? You have a gross physical body made up of, physical atoms and things, and it can become divinized, but it's still, it's your spirit that's divine, right? You're embracing the spiritual aspect of yourself. So this idea of blood being holy and Jesus' blood, right, is wrong. It's not. There's nothing to do with blood. There's the divine energy, the prana, which would be the blood of the divine energy the energy, the Pranhuiti that's given in the transmission of the Sajmark system that we have. That could be considered the energetic blood of your soul, and what that animates your soul and things. But that's, something different. It's in your physical body as well. But, it's etheric. It's subtle. Like God is subtle, and the Christian religion is not frickin' subtle. It's over the top with all of its blood and its, all the things that they say, right? And it's because it's a distortion of Jesus' real teaching. And so this person's saying, that's why the Spirit is blood, only way the Spirit is made perfect through him, only way God bless. And so then there was this other one here. I think this is it here. The person said, it's called a miracle. Miracles are hard to believe. God is perfection, so when he intervenes, it looks like perfect, like a miracle. Well, God is subtle. He prevents things. Like, only when you see things happen, like there was a car crash that we almost had. My wife and I talk about this a lot. So my wife and I were going to this park to walk with our dogs, and is just 10 minutes away from our house. And it's a very safe drive down a country road. But there was a road leading into that road, and some kids were joyriding, or somebody, like a bad driver, and driving like some kind of shitbox car. And the road is, there's a stop sign at the end of the road, but the person's coming around a curve and then going down a hill. And these kids were joyriding, and they obviously weren't good drivers, or the person driving wasn't a good driver. And the car, like, just missed us. Like, the car, they ran the stop sign, and they were heading, and there was no road. It was a like a T and not an X, not a four-way intersection. And so there's a river on the other side and a bunch of trees. And so they had to turn and make a left turn. And I don't know how they made it. Like they just missed us, right? A second earlier or a second later, I would have been dead. They were slammed right into me. I was in the passenger seat. My wife was driving. And so I'm like, well, there's the way that we were just saved, right? Like, that wasn't I don't want to call that a miracle, but it shows you all the things that you're prevented, right? Like, you find out one of your friends or someone you grew up with has cancer, and you're like, wow, like, or a bunch of them get cancer or whatever, or something like that, right? And so God we should be grateful all the time, and we're going to die anyway, so that's not even, but all the things that are there can always be made worse. Your life could always be made worse, right? And sometimes you have these miseries that remind you of that, tragedies and things. They're like slaps in the face and wake-up calls, right? When you have a near-death experience. And so, yeah, sometimes it doesn't have to be subtle, or it needs not to be subtle just to wake you up. But in Trump's case, without the bloody ear, this thing is nothing. And it's now nothing anyway. People have moved on. Trump is the only one talking about it. Think maybe some Trumpers or whatever, but people calling it a miracle, it's silly. There's all the kinds of ways they could have stopped this thing ahead of time. And the fact that he's bleeding, the blood and Christianity and this thing and a miracle and all this stuff, the catch-up gate, I mean, that's what makes it real. Like, if they just fired some shots and Trump got down, they said, oh, they tried to kill himself, they tried to kill him, that would have been like, okay. But with him getting up with a bloody ear and pumping his fist, that was the whole story. That was the meat of the thing. Without him being bloody and without him pumping his fist and saying, fight, 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 and all these other people who'd hate Trump calling it a badass moment, and he acted with courage, and then him calling it divine and calling it providence because it resembles all these other sort of over-the-top bullshit things of the Christian religion. And so this is what I'm talking about, right? Blood is not divine, right? And this idea of bleeding, and there's so much darkness in Christianity with Jesus being crucified. The cross, I mean, Jesus suffered. Let's say the crucifixion is real, which I believe it is. And then all his disciples suffered because people suck. That they had a guy who was, spiritually more evolved than other people. Jesus wasn't, he didn't reach the goal. Like, he was, in the early stages of spirituality, and I can demonstrate this through his teachings, and you wouldn't listen to me anyway, but there's, immaturity there, like spiritual immaturity, but he's far higher up than the average person. People living there too. There's so many people without the ability for abstract thought. So Jesus, I'm not insulting Jesus. I'm just saying, the truth about him, right? And so, he evolved spiritually, which to his credit is a hard thing to do. And he started teaching things that were, he evolved and transcended his religion, which is something that everyone should be like, oh, wow, that's something that we should do. Like transcending your religion, where you go from, the religious worship where the religion is a middleman between you and God, into where you become a spiritual person. And not everyone can do it. Like, just they don't have the capacity or the desire or their ego's stupid, whatever it is. But, everybody can do it. Like, it's something that everyone can do. Like, it's what we're supposed to do eventually, right? Maybe you're not ready yet. Your soul's, not had enough lives, and, you haven't had enough, you're not ready. But you can do it. Anybody can do it right this moment. So, and even when you do it, things just get harder and worse, and like it's not so great thing, right? Like, you start having an internal relationship with God, it becomes a struggle. Like, your life becomes more difficult, and You see things you don't want to see. I mean, it's just, it's like going back into the Matrix. It's, this idea of taking the blue pill and going back into the Matrix, like the first, Cypher character in the Matrix movie. Like, once you take the red pill, it's not like you guys know this as truthers. Your life doesn't get easier when you have higher levels of consciousness. It's much easier to be a sheeple and be a religious person, but it doesn't make it better. It's like, all right, now you have higher levels of consciousness and you have more responsibility, and it's more difficult to navigate. And so what Jesus did is said, all right, I'm not going to worship this bullshit religion anymore. I'm going to connect to God directly. The kingdom of heaven is within, and he found God inside. And that's a big thing. And so he was a saint that came there, and he's teaching people. He's helping people to understand this, but they don't get it because, they don't want to get it, and they're limited. And that's what people are like, and it sucks. And so the powers that be, the Jewish religion, the Pharisees, the guys who ran the religion, and the Roman, government things, well, like this guy's going to, he's teaching people that's going to usurp our power. If people listen to him, we won't have any power over these people, because he's saying that, the God is within you, and once you realize that, governments and, these things, it's hard to control you. And so they go, all right, let's make an example of this guy. And so they crucified him, right? There's nothing divine in it. There's nothing good about it. And it's just evil people doing bad things to a guy who's a saint and a spiritual person. And that's one of the problems with that part of the world, and America and Europe, is we kill saintly people. If somebody becomes a saint, immediately the system and the people turn on them and go after them, right? And so, like, that's, that's one of the great things about India. They celebrate spiritual people. They have a lot of fake gurus who fake being spiritual, and they celebrate them too. So there's, issues with it. But at least if you're a saint there, you don't have to worry about being crucified, right? That's one of the reasons that a lot of spiritual, highly developed souls have been born in India, because of their ability to embrace saintly people. They want saints. They want saints there. They're looking for them, right? They believe that they're there. That's one of the good things about the Hindu religion, because they embrace a new person, a new saint, and they say that people can, reach this level, and they're always looking out for the next higher developed soul. Of course, that breeds all these fake gurus, and there's always ways that people will fuck things up, right? But that's, but that's a positive thing. But in America and Europe and the Middle East, they kill saintly people. And so they crucified Jesus and, humiliated him, and his people turned on him. His three of his disciples, one betrayed him, one denied him, one doubted him, and they killed him. There's nothing divine about it. I don't know about the resurrection, because you don't rise physically, but I guess people maybe saw him in etheric form. I'm not sure what was happening. Maybe he didn't die, and he went to a deep yogic state and came out of it, and so he lived after he was crucified. There's different things. Like, I'm not sure which story is true. But in terms of the whole thing, the cross is like how he was tormented. But this idea that he died for your sins, and a person can't die for someone else's sins, so that's all bullshit. And so this whole thing with the cross, it's just bringing him back the most painful time in Jesus' life, right? When all the people turned on him, he felt, God, why hast thou forsaken me, right? That's what, Jesus said to God. He had a moment of lack of faith, when he was being tortured and things. And it's a painful moment in his life. Why would you want to bring that back up? And the cross being a symbol, it shouldn't be a symbol. Like the whole Christian religion using blood and sacrifice and these things, and his being tormented. So it's his teachings that are being lost, right? Like his good teachings, the kingdom of heaven is within. His example of throwing off the shackles of his religion and connecting to God directly and evolving from that. Those are the things that should be, focused on. But those things won't control you. They'll lose control over you, the religion. So they created a false Jesus. They created this Jesus that that fits in their narrative, so that they can control you. And that's just, that's Truther 101. If you don't get that, then you're not really a truther. You're not becoming a truther. And so then this person said this here. I'm unsubscribing after hearing your Antichrist statements near the end. Pray you turn to the truth. Yahshua did die for our sins, and whomsoever believeth on him shall not perish but have eternal life. Please dig deeper on this, and I will be sincerely praying for you. See, the thing is that, it's impossible to die for somebody's sins, and why would we live a life if somebody else could die for your sins? And why could somebody die for your sins before you even created them? Right? It's silly. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, think about it. You throw off your indoctrination and your years of sitting there in the, the whatever, the pews, like in the Catholic Church we had pews, whatever, sitting there as parishioners and hearing this drummed into your head that this is what Jesus died for you. It's a good deal. That's why they're selling it to you. Oh, you mean I don't have to pay for my own sins? I don't have to take personal responsibility and spiritual responsibility for what I do? Jesus dies for them? Oh my God, that's such a good deal. I'll take that deal. I mean, I'd like that deal, right? If it was true, I would love that deal. That you could go out and do whatever the fuck you want and somebody else had to pay for it, right? Where does that exist in life, right? Where you can do whatever you want and somebody else has to pay for it. It doesn't exist in the spirit world. Everything's accounted for. Everything that you do, you're responsible for. And so them telling you this makes you believe that you can get away with something, right? I mean, what do you think is going to happen? People look at this as a loophole, and they'll go out and they'll behave in the worst possible way, thinking that they can just turn to Jesus in their deathbed. And, it's silly. It's just a stupid idea. No one should believe it, right? It's like they're selling, they're just like Trump's bloody ear. You shouldn't believe it. It's silly, right? And so the other piece to this, like with that, is that what I said before when they had these missionaries and crusades and things. So, when you hear the word pagan, people think they're all devil worshippers. If they hear any other religion, they're devil worshippers. That's what Christians hear. Oh, you're going to hell because you're worshiping false gods. You're not worshiping the one true God. Some prick sitting on a divine throne where he's judging everybody and all these things. That's your wrathful God. That's not a real God. That's your fake God, right? That's your Baal. That's your Moloch. Jesus is happy with what I'm saying right now. I mean, think about it. Like, I'm telling you the truth of how you've been deceived. Like, you think Jesus isn't happy with me doing this, right? I said I had that dream where, I had one dream where Jesus was in it, and I said, is it okay if I, talk to Christians about this stuff? And Jesus said, yeah, why do you think I'm sending them to you? I mean, that was my confirmation for this. And you can say that's a bullshit dream. All right, whatever. But it's truth, right? The Jesus and the God that you worship is your Moloch and your, these fake false gods, right? It's I guess there's some divinity in it. It's higher than maybe doing nothing initially, but it's distorted. It isn't a real thing. And so this idea that the pagans were evil. So, I watched a few shows recently in that time period. One was called The Vikings or something else I can't remember. My wife and I were watching this thing called The Winter King. But there was a time period where paganism was being overthrown by Christianity. And the Christians did it in the worst possible way. First the Catholic Church, of course, all the Crusades later on, all those types of things. But this idea that all these people are going to hell and you were saving them. And so whatever violent, bullshit, forceful thing and manipulative thing you could do to destroy their belief system and force them to do Christianity, you were doing a good thing. And that's just bullshit. All that blood, all that pain that you caused the Christian religion, people in the Christian faith, the leaders of the Christian religion, the missionaries themselves, all the abuse that you heaped on these people, that was all your sins, and you have to pay for those things. It had nothing to do with Jesus, and it had nothing to do with saving those people. You were forcing some bullshit, mediocre, like low-level religion on people who probably were doing something that was more superior to what you're forcing on them. Their paganism, their polytheism was at least, there is divine beings and levels of what people might consider gods, right? There's higher developed etheric souls that do God's work. So there is this, there's only one God, but there are, a higher developed souls that people can think of as gods, right? Like people, and it's not, they're not gods, but that's what people perceive them as because they're higher developed than them. That's what people think about Jesus, right? And so you say you're doing polytheism, but it's like accept the Son. Well, why not accept God directly? Why do I have to go, the God is better than the Son? No, but you can just accept the Son. Well, why the Son? Because, well, we control the Son. That's our guy. Oh, okay. Because God is in everything and everybody. And so this bullshit idea that Christians think that their thing is superior when it's really not that great of a religion. And again, this is not a knock on Jesus. I would say connect with the real Jesus. Find the real Jesus, right? Find the essence of Jesus. Like connect directly with the essence of Jesus beyond your religion, right? I mean, there's better things than that, but like that's still superior to what you're doing now, right? And again, like, it comes from this bad idea that God is some evil prick sitting on some throne in heaven and it's judging everybody and wrathful and vengeful and, jealous and petty. I mean, it's just a narcissistic sociopath, right? And so that's how he's presented in the Old Testament. And so that's the basis of the religion. And all the sin, original sin, and the blood, and the pain and the suffering, and all the things that they do, like the crucifixion, and there's just blood and torture and shit all over the place in this thing, right? And so it's not refined. The Sajmarg meditation that I do, no force is to be used. That's why you don't hear me forcing or trying to force or coerce people and say something like you're going to hell if you don't do my thing or whatever. That people have to come to it. You present the transmission, the cleaning as an option for people to try, and people come and try it, and most of them quit. Most of them go away, and there's no sense of, oh my God, you're going to hell now or whatever. And, the opportunity is incredible. Those of us who've done the system, of course, now what's happened to Christianity is happening to my Sajmarg with this bullshit heartfulness cult that's created by this prick Dodgy, right? Like I'm watching my thing turn into your thing, like right before my eyes. And I think I've been around in past lives and I've seen this happen before, right? Where something good is turned into something bad. And so, but no force is used. The forceless force, which is a transmission, no coercion, because doing evil things to make people do your religion, using force, doing it where people are forced by gunpoint or by sword or spear and, tortured. And I mean, the way that Christians treated the Irish and the Scottish and then all the people of Europe to force them to get rid of their pagan beliefs and force Christianity and lie about the holidays because Jesus wasn't born on the solstice, the winter solstice, and he didn't die on the spring equinox. Those were pagan holidays that they hijacked. All the bullshit, all the manipulation, all the lies don't produce a positive thing. And that's the same thing with Trump. Right? You can say, oh my God, Trump is our guy. It's okay for him to lie because he's divine and he's not even a Christian. Jesus Christ. Like this is the same, you're falling for the same shit over and over again. Like what Trump does isn't okay, right? Like him doing bad things and faking an injury and pouring fake blood on him and proclaiming some sort of miracle that you guys buy into. And even if you see through it, but you're saying it's still okay, I'm going to vote for him anyway. Well, good things don't come from bad things. Bad intentions can't, the end doesn't justify the means, right? And so this is my point of view. You have to, your behavior and your actions and the way you achieve something and the way you get the word out. And the fact of the matter is people suck and you can have the best spiritual system in the world and they'll turn it into crap. And that's what we are as human beings. Like, accept that, right? That's where we are as human beings. That it isn't that God doesn't send person after person, higher developed soul after higher developed soul, and movement after movement to humanity. It's just that humanity won't accept the good, and humanity seeks the evil, seeks the lower. Humanity rejects the higher in themselves and then, outside themselves. And in some places, they even torture and kill the higher. And so as soon as you embrace the higher nature of God, they turn on you and kill you in many places, including America and Europe and these Middle Eastern countries. And so that's the problem. The problem isn't God isn't trying, it's that people won't take these opportunities. And the opportunities being given to you here and over again throughout existence, and people won't take it, right? And so humanity's future is based in that. But humanity is always embracing the lower nature shit like Trump and shit like Kamala and, whatever it is, right? All this crap that's out there. Humanity keeps on doing it over and over again. They embrace the lower and reject the higher. That's the problem. And until people come to terms with that, and I'm not saying I'm some expert in it, in terms of embracing the higher, but at least I'm aware of my problem, right? At least I'm aware of this problem that humanity has, that we have a lower nature, which is our ego, which embrace our ego and our desires and our, not why our ability to choose the wrong thing. We don't want to give up. That's why people talk about freedom. All this bullshit freedom stuff. Oh, we have freedom. No, you don't have freedom. You can only make one right choice every time, and that's the divine choice. Everything else is a wrong choice. Yeah, you have the freedom to make the wrong choice. Congratulations, right? You have the freedom to make the wrong choice. And that's what you're fighting for? Don't take away our freedom. We have to fight for the right to party, right? The fucking Beastie Boys. That's what that bullshit's all about, right? Is that you have the freedom to make the wrong choice. That's what America's all about. Like you're just thumbing your nose at the divinity that's within you and the soul that's within you and embracing your ego and calling that your freedom. Yeah, okay, great, that's your freedom. Your freedom to do wrong. Congratulations. You fought for it and you got it, right? For a short period of time before your bad choices cause you cancer or cause you heart disease or cause you whatever, and then you leave this world and your soul goes, what the fuck did you do that for? And you come back and incarnate again to just do it all over again. That's the problem with humanity, right? And at least I'm aware of it. Like I'm aware of it in myself. I don't care about you're on your own, right? But I'm aware of that battle that I have between my ego and my soul, and I'm working towards embracing the divinity within me and my soul, and have, done it for long enough, and I'm old enough now where I can understand the divine choice and see it and make it, right? And it's a step. Like I've taken a step in the right direction. It's not, the whole journey, but it's something that everyone can do. Where you realize, all right, this is a battle between my ego and my soul, and find a system, the Sajmark system, to help you clarify that, clear out the abomination of your ego and of the effects of your desires and your choices that you make, and purify yourself and purify the spiritual essence in a subtle way, and then find the divinity within you, embrace that, and feel that love and God's love, and cultivate a relationship with that. And so that's a superior thing to do. What you're doing is a joke, like it's not even a real, you're not really experiencing God. You're just using it to boost your ego and think that you're superior to other people, and because you got some bullshit book and you have a bunch of people that all believe the same cult like bullshit about stuff that doesn't even make sense to anybody who thinks about it. But you've been indoctrinated with it, and you're not willing to do what Jesus did and transcend your bullshit and connect to God directly. And that's something we all have to do eventually. And so you're just delaying the inevitable. All right, let's get into the Trump shit here now. This is Monday, August 5th, 2024. So this video will be out Tuesday, most likely. I can't imagine I'll put it up before then. There are a lot of things to get to. A bunch of things with Kamala. We're going to go through Kamala's stuff. I just saw Morning Joe was defending Josh Shapiro. So they're really pushing for that guy for being the VP. I want to get into some Olympic stuff and then, of course, the economy. And so to start off with, JoJo Magoo starts wandering off here, goes back up the plane. And I don't know if this is the plane he came in on. I'm not sure if this is Air Force One. I don't think it is. But he's not supposed to be doing this, right? He's supposed to be meeting with the press, talking about the hostages, right, being released. So he just disappears into the plane, and all the media and all the people that are there, they do these sort of press conferences around helicopters and at airports where the audio isn't very good. They don't use, the media for whatever reason doesn't use noise canceling microphones. And so they come out and it's hard to hear them. It's a way to cover up for, like Trump used to do this as well, but Joe Biden, it's like whatever it is, right? This is like watching an SNL skit. Now I'm assuming that he might be going to the bathroom or having his diaper change or something like that, right? But I don't think this is Air Force One. It might be. It might be the plane he came in on. I don't know. But he just goes and he walks up to the plane, and all these people are left hanging, staring up, waiting for the president to come back out. And again, maybe he's going to the bathroom or whatever, but everything he does is suspect because of the way he looks. And, this is, and with the economy, the world economy collapsing and, the Civil War, all these things I was talking about earlier unfolding. And this MNFer just, just does this, right? Which is, wonderful. And Kamala's just sitting here staring at him. Now, she's tied to this MNFer. And, she's, they're going to be blamed for any kind of economic meltdown that we're going to have. So they just start wandering out here, right? And he waves to everybody like he's just getting off the plane. Like they're all there. He waves to them. And then he comes over here like he just got off the plane and he's going to answer then they're going to talk to the reporters about this epic day when they had a prisoner exchange with Russia. And so he's waving at everybody, right? And so, that's not supposed to happen. And so before we get into the other Kamala stuff, here's this one. Treasonous Kyle Rittenhouse. So Kyle Rittenhouse, that kid from the shooting, he's always been like a shill anyway, but that's not important. But he's been a hero of the right. And he went after Trump he said he wasn't going to vote for Trump because Trump's weak on the Second Amendment. And so the right wing turned on him. Treasonous Kyle Rittenhouse has apologized for his blasphemous statements about our glorious MAGA movement. Let our forgiveness be a warning, though. Our patience with the next dissident will not be as gracious. Kyle Rittenhouse apologized and came back to MAGA. We can stop attacking him now. And they just, apparently, they went off on him like the right wing does. And so, Kyle Rittenhouse stopped supporting Trump for 12 hours, and they immediately investigated him, which, is classic, right? Symbolism will be their downfall. Infiltration instead of invasion. And they have Kyle Rittenhouse here, and then they have him doing this Freemasonic gesture, which, of course, that could be whatever. But he's always been an inside guy. And then here, he's a she, Isaac Cappy's army. It's all a psyop. He's a she. This is what these remedial QBs do, right? These QBs and these hardcore Trumpers. And they can't identify, they can't look at Trump and see what a piece of crap he is. He's a total piece of shit, but they can't see that. But as soon as you turn on Trump, this guy turns into a biological female. This is a female. Kyle Rittenhouse, female, skeletal markers. And then he comes back to Trump, says he's sorry, apologizes. And they immediately say, okay, you're a dude again. This is how they roll, right? Conservatives, we don't judge or cancel anyone like the left does. Kyle Rittenhouse, all politicians should be held accountable. Conservatives. And then Kyle Rittenhouse is a effing, And so, they're horrible people. The right-wing people, the QBs, are just horrible people. Like, they talk about the left, and of course the left, these extreme left people are horrible as well. But they're just idiots. They're all idiots, right? They're all low-vibrational people making the world a worse place with every breath and every stupid thing they post on the internet. So, right before the shooting, I didn't really cover this thing. I didn't cover the riot so much and these things for, a variety of reasons. But I was watching the news. It was either CNN or MSNBC. And there was these guys coming in who had AR-15s who were going to help the police, right? And they interviewed Kyle Rittenhouse. And I just searched for it again, but I never could find the interview. But they interviewed him, and he was showing off his first aid kit and saying all the things he's going to help the police with. And, there was like these 20 guys that came in from, I don't know where they came in from. Was he from Wisconsin? Wherever he was from, or, Minnesota or something, wherever he came from. And they were going to wherever they were going to Minnesota. He came from another state where they were having those riots in Minnesota, right? Is that the story? Whatever it was. Like, I have a vague memory of it. I almost forgot this thing. But I see this kid being interviewed. It's before the shooting happened with him, right? Like, it was like a day before even, maybe. Or it was earlier on that day or a day before. And then it comes out he was in the shooting. I'm like, when I first saw him being interviewed, and he had his, AR-15, I'm like, this is going to be a shill thing, right? He's like, he looked like a total patsy. And like, what I didn't know that was going to happen, but I didn't believe it to be like I didn't believe him to be authentic, right? And then the whole thing happened with all of it, right? It's all fake. Yeah, this all of it staged and whatever. And so this guy becomes whatever he becomes, and the right wing loves him, even though he was easy to see through in the beginning. And then all the things that happened afterwards in terms of his trial and all this stuff, and then he became a hero. And now he says something against Trump and they turn on him. And, they're just, the inability to see what's going on is like so epic, right?
I have a funny story for you guys. So for my 27th birthday, I got Botox.
No 27th birthday is complete unless you get an injection of a neurotoxin into your face, right? So you can kill some of the nerve, you do nerve damage to your face, right? I showed you this other video someone sent me with it. It was like at a plastic surgery, whatever it was, like a bunch of nurses and doctors, female doctors, talking about getting, in some case, over 100 injections of Botox, right? And some of them were like in their early 20s. Just it's sad and sick, right?
Baby Botox, just right here in like my T-zone.
Gotta take care of your T-zone.
And I did not like it, so I haven't got it again.
So she's playing music in the background, which means they're going to copyright this thing. So, but she says that her eyebrow would go up independently, and her somebody would point it out, and it wouldn't go down on its own for about 20 seconds. So she didn't like the Botox, but it just speaks to her and all these things, all these people, these famous people, and they'll do anything to. I mean, she's only 27. But anyways, I was going to do a voiceover here. I have a voiceover already done. But then I found this here, this article, and then we'll get to the voiceover. Okay, so I was just about to edit this video. I was talking about the Olympics in the video, obviously. And this came up, and I thought this was about cheating. Watch Jordan Childs react to winning Olympic bronze after shock score change. So I'm like, oh, this is about cheating. But it ended up not being about cheating. It was about this. The Team USA gymnast had ranked 5th on the scoreboard after her routine. The last of the competition received a 13.666, right? 5th is also important because there's 5 gymnasts usually on these teams. And, there's a coven is 5 witches, right? But she had a score of 13.666. However, after submitting a score inquiry, her result was increased to a 13.766. So there's another 666 sighting here. I've talked about this so much in the Olympics, how much 666 stuff there is. And this is just another indication, especially with the gymnastics. Okay, so weird stuff keeps on getting recommended to me. I'm trying to edit this video, but I was just finishing up editing the gymnastics part. And this came in. This is the Rebecca Andrade from Brazil, and Simone Biles and Jordan Childs are bowing before her, right? And so it's weird as F, right? Just weird. I don't, is this something to do with Brazil? Like, is Brazil going to somehow be a part of the, it's America bowing before Brazil is another way to look at it. But just a bizarre image, right? It's good to have respect for your competition. Simone Biles is considered the greatest gymnast ever, right? The greatest gymnast. and has more decorated and won more events than this girl here who's younger than her. Um, you know, just bizarre. So the Olympics have been a total disaster. There was the epic, or the, I don't know what you want to call it, sacrilegious, whatever that was, the opening ceremony, which was the worst of these ritualistic opening ceremonies we've seen over the years. It was by far the worst. And it was, just, well, you all know what it was, right? So it was really bad. And then just all of the coverage and all the woke stuff, the 666 stuff I've covered, just the things I've seen, right? But the coverage of the Olympics by NBC, so they now have all these cable networks, which I have, right? I have it on DirecTV and I have YouTube TV, right? And yet they couldn't play the full event. Like for basketball games, they would come in the middle of the game, right? And they have all these channels covering like this, stuff no one's going to freaking watch. And it wouldn't be labeled correctly. They would say, well, this is, whatever it is, volleyball or, kayaking or whatever it might be, right? And bicycling, some kind of, and then you'd turn it on and it would be something else. And they couldn't get that right, and so I saved stuff and so I could fast forward I don't watch things, sporting events. I can't watch it with commercials and I have to fast forward through all the dead time, just get to the end of the thing, right? And so there was so much that was just like wrong with their coverage, sloppy coverage, and with all this technological advancement, they still had like epic failures, missing out on things, and it just wasn't coordinated across like 6 or 7 different NBC networks. And it just is icky, right? And of course this boxer who tested as being a dude and now is in 2 boxers who are dudes fighting at the end of that thing, and just all these things are intentional, but just not a good Olympics. Apparently they made everybody pay for the Olympics with they didn't accept cash, and they made everybody wear like an armband. It was very sort of authoritarian, and people left after the opening ceremony. The restaurants were empty. Like it was an epic fail for Paris. Like people were just not digging it, and the thing was just like a complete failure across the board. The thing with Simone Biles in the last Olympics, she got the McTwisties. Remember, they got something they call the twisties, where you get sort of you lose the ability to do these flips and things because you get shook. It's like getting vertigo or something, which makes total sense because it's scary the way they flip around that balancing beam and all that shit. Like it just doesn't seem like a smart thing to do, right? You're inevitably going to fall and hit that thing, the rest of it. But she got the McTwisties, and she couldn't compete. She had to quit. And it was psychological issues. And it was when they were making such a big deal about athletes being depressed, and they were supporting them, that tennis girl, that girl from American Tennis Girl, and they were supporting athletes quitting because of mental issues and mental health, and applauding them and saying they were the real champions for having mental issues and not being able to compete, right? How brave they were. And, this Simone Biles is the greatest female gymnast of all time, was given Athlete of the Year for quitting and having a psychological breakdown. Remember that? Like how big a deal they made about it. But then they called this the Redemption Tour. And now she's winning again, and they're talking about how great it is to win, and dominate. But before it was, which has always been the case. And both things can't be true, right? You can't be applauded for acknowledging your psychological breakdowns and then at the same time be applauded for pushing through your issues and redeeming yourself and getting medals, right? The whole thing's just falls apart. Like it's just like everything else. It's devolved into suck, right? So these clips are coming out now, right? This is the Hammer guy and Kamala J. Harris.
I've been fortunate and blessed to, during the course of being vice president, have many situations where it becomes clear to me that there are, people of every age and gender, by the way, who see something about being the first that lets them know they don't need to be limited by other people's limited understanding of who can do what.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
And so this came up as well.
So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. Well, this was a little controversial in San Francisco.
I mean, the cackle, right?
And frankly, my staff went bananas. They were very concerned because we didn't know at the time whether I was going to have an opponent in my re-election race.
Okay, so I'm going to go through this again. Let's just watch this, because I'm going to go through this again with a bigger YouTube video.
But I said, look, I'm done. This is a serious issue, and I've got a little political capital, and I'm going to spend some of it. And this is what we did.
I think it's rough because I asked the attendance officer, you know, could she help me or give me some, make up some hours or whatever I can do. And she told me that she didn't care and hung up on me.
These districts that get federal funds are required to not only accommodate these parents so that their child can be in a traditional education, but to make reasonable adjustments in their policy, which can include attendance.
Now, the school district superintendent says this is an extreme case and action simply needed to be taken. Worst case scenario for Andrea Black, she could go to jail and her son could be put in foster care. She says she is desperately hoping.
Okay, so we're going to come back to that original video. Let's watch this one first.
Missing school may not only affect your child's education, it can also be a crime in the city of San Francisco. Joining us to explain how truancy impacts the entire family is San Francisco District Attorney Kamala Harris. It is great to have you with us.
This is, you know.
Honor to be here. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, may I call you Kamala?
Absolutely. You must. You must.
Ms. DA? Or
Miss DA.
Let's define truancy. It must mean more than just missing a few days from school.
Absolutely right. We are not talking about hooky and playing hooky, and frankly, we all did, okay?
Exactly. We all played hooker. No, that's just you, Kamala. We all played hooker.
Okay? What we're talking about is chronic school absenteeism, and the focus for me really has been the elementary and middle school students. We're talking about children, very young children, who have missed up to 50, 60 days of a 180-day school year. Wow. A very, very real issue, and something much more than just the occasional lapse. And we're talking, by the way, about unexcused absences.
Right.
So do their parents even know that they're missing so much school?
Well, when you're talking about a 7- and 8-year-old, I would think yes.
My gosh, now, if you're talking about that...
So, think about this. All right, so they have kids in San Francisco. These are almost all black kids, right? These are either, you know, they're black or they're just economically... These are, you know, kids who are in a difficult parents in a difficult economic situation. Many of them single parents. So these would be moms, single moms, who, you know, are not being supported by the system, right? You know, having a difficult time living in poverty and not being able to keep their kids going to school, right? And Kamala, it's a real problem. And so Kamala's reaction is, let's lock these MNFers up and throw them in foster care. Like, that's her reaction, like, as a district attorney. Like, she has, I have some political capital, so we'll get into that in a moment. This is her solution. Like, and she's giddy about it.
Many days being missed from school. How many kids are we talking about here? What percentage of the total school population?
I'm glad you asked. So last year in the San Francisco public school system, we had over 5,500 students who are designated as habitually and chronically truant. And of that number, 2,400 are elementary school students.
Oh, my gosh. So how is it that...
So they're going to put 5,000 parents or 5,000, you know, sets of parents or single parents in jail and put those kids in the foster system as a solution? And because the foster parents aren't going to get those kids to go to school, right? Like, this is a horrible solution. It's breaking up a family. It's having difficult circumstances, right? Somebody who's systematically, you know, who, people who are in poverty, who she believes, as a liberal, who are been put there by a system, right? Ancestors of slaves in many cases, people who are poor people, who are, you know, disadvantaged in different ways. And the liberal view is that it's a systemic problem, which I agree with to some extent, right? And so it's a systemic problem, and she's punishing these people. So she's not a real liberal. I mean, what a horrible person this is, right? Even the worst conservative person wouldn't be locking up these parents, right? Like, I mean, she's a horrible human being as a liberal locking up black parents or people of, color, or at least economically disadvantaged people, mostly black people. And then think about it, right? Like, horrible human being.
Would not be standing here were it not for the education I received. And I know many of us will say the same thing. And I believe a child going without an education is tantamount to a crime.
Okay, so that's not the case, right? Now, I don't love the educational system. And we know that the school system's broken down, right? But, definitely being out in the streets and not being in school for these kids. These kids are at-risk kids, and might lead to, statistically, she's saying that these kids are going to end up as criminals, which would make sense, right? So I can understand that. So there's a real problem here, because these kids are better off in school than in some other situation, not in school, right? If they're being homeschooled, that's one thing, but still, it's the difficult place where they live, where being in the becoming a criminal is a part of it, right? So it's a real problem, but her solution is horrible. Okay, so let me just add this. I'm editing here. There's a period of time where my family and I lived in poverty. And my kids were young. And my ex and I, we had 4 kids in 5 years. They were like called Irish twins, right? 2 of them were born on consecutive Mother's Day. And, it was like having a daycare. And we were homesteading. We were learning how to homestead. There's a whole bunch of things going on. But anyways, and my ex had mental issues, the whole thing I've talked about in this past. And I was underprepared to be a dad, and, like most of us are, parent these things. And so, but most people who have young kids go through this, where you're just completely overwhelmed all the time, right? And you have these parents who are living in desperate situations, often living in abject poverty, in high risk areas, and they can just, it's all they can do to make it through a day. So many parents are like this. Many of you have experienced a time in your life where you're just making it, and maybe your relationship, either you're a single parent or you have a relationship that's falling apart. There's so much drama, and God knows what else is going on, and you're completely overwhelmed. And some of these parents are young parents, teenage parents, things like this. And it's enough that they can just make it through a day. And they're struggling with their kids, right? They're in at-risk situations. And so Kamala is going to bury them by arresting them, maybe causing them to lose their job, who knows what, giving them a criminal record now, a felony, and, having to tell people, yeah, my kids were truant from school, and I was arrested for that. Like, that just makes you sound like a bad person, a bad parent, right? And this person who's born into wealth and privilege, she had 2 parents who were in the upper class of their respective societies, of Indian society, a Brahmin, and a guy who, in Jamaica, they were academic people, top of their class in terms of their academic. They're coming from foreign countries, and they got into Stanford where they met. And she grew up with, money. They had, professor salaries, or her mom was some kind of a scientist and worked at these labs. She had money. She grew up in privilege and money. She went to private schools in Canada, right? These things. She was somebody who had all the advantages that most people don't. And for her to throw these single parents and these poor people in jail, again, their kids should be in school, but that's not a solution. She's burying these people. Like, she's taking a bad situation these people are in and putting them in a worse situation, right? And it's not, it's not effective. And she's so clueless to all this stuff. She's so oblivious because she's an elitist, right? She has no idea.
So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. Well, this was a little controversial in San Francisco.
Like that witch laugh. It's controversial anywhere. It's a horrible decision. Why would anybody make this decision? Not just politically, but just in terms of being a human being. let's lock the parents up because the kids aren't going to school, right? Maybe find out what the situation is.
And frankly, my staff went bananas. They were very concerned because we didn't know at the time whether I was going to have an opponent in my re-election race.
She's so like nasty, and she's such a witch-like character here. She doesn't even realize what she's saying, because she's saying this is a big thing. Like these kids, that a kid not getting an education is tantamount to being a crime. Whatever she said, to being like committing a crime. It's criminal for a kid not to get an education. But then we were like, well, is this going to hurt my re-election campaign? And I'm running unopposed, but they might turn on me if I do this, right? And so, like a horrible human being, like, just saying these things out loud, like no filter, like this is bad. She's clearly not senile like Joe Biden, so that she doesn't have that excuse. And this is when she's younger, right? This is when she's, she was banging that guy Brown, and he was married, whatever situation. This is her knee pads days, right? She went from knee pads to locking up parents for the.
But I said, look, I'm done. This is a serious issue, and
I'm done.
Little political capital, and I'm going to spend some of it. And this is what we did. We recognized that in that initiative, as a prosecutor and law enforcement, I have a huge stick. The school district...
Yeah, you do. She's got a huge stick. Michelle Obama knows about having a huge stick.
got a carrot.
The school has a carrot. Schools, they're always pushing those crappy carrots at school.
Let's work in tandem around our collective objective and goal, which is to get those kids in school. So, to that end, on my letterhead, now let me tell you something about my letterhead. When you're
let's listen to her about her letterhead.
DA of a major city in this country, usually the job comes with a badge. And there is often an artistic rendering of said badge on your stationery. So I sent a letter out on my letterhead to every parent in the school district, outlining the connection that was statistically proven between elementary school truancy, high school dropouts, who will become a victim of crime, and who will become a perpetrator of crime. We sent it out to everyone. A friend of mine actually called me and he said, Kamala, my wife got the letter. She freaked out. She brought all the kids into the living room, held up the letter, said, if you don't go to school, Kamala's going to put you and me in jail.
Look at how happy she is. Look at how happy she is, right? Like, Kamala's going to put us in jail. Not that this is a crime, these things.
Yes, we achieved intended effect.
Just horrible human being. This is only 14 years ago, right? This is her knee pads days, and she was, skyrocketed through her own, like her just scumbaggery. Like I said, Trump does it, everybody does it, but she did it. Knee pads it, gets these positions she doesn't deserve and is on her way. And this is the kind of person she is, the kind of power that she exerts, right? So let's listen to this part again.
Yes, we achieved intended effect.
Intended effect, right? Here's a picture of Jimmy Savile that I have in a folder called Human Sacrifice that I used to make videos about, which isn't really funny. And this is the guy who captured kids in the movie Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. He was the truancy officer. And this is what Kamala wants to be, right? The desired effect was her parents are talking about Kamala as like a boogeyman. Oh, Kamala's going to lock us up. Kamala's going to put us in jail. If you don't go to school, Kamala, Krampus, the boogeyman, the monster under your bed's going to get you. Look out for Kamala. She's going to get us. She's going to throw us in jail, right? That's the desired effect that she's giggling about. That's how she feels about power. That she gets off on people saying, oh, my God, I'm scared of Kamala. Then the mom sits down, reads this letter with her badge on it and all this shit she doesn't deserve. So because she was servicing some guy 30 years older than her. Again, this doesn't mean Trump is better. I'm not saying that, right? I want to make sure all these videos, when I'm insulting Trump, I'm not saying Kamala's better, you binary fucks, right? Like, this is not any of those things. This is me just saying this is how bad things have gotten. These are the two people, And they've always been despicable people running for president in my lifetime, right? Some may be a little bit better than others, but these are the bottom of the barrel, and they're just horrible in every level. And the thing is, even when people know these things about them, they'll still vote for Kamala, they'll still vote for Trump, because that's how, like, the what people are willing to accept as a legitimate leader, as their legitimate leader, they're willing to accept these bottom of the barrel people, right? So here are these guys, right?
Increasingly problematic in San Francisco. Not all, but many. And so it's an early warning. It's an intervention strategy to get serious about that correlation and engage youth before they engage in inappropriate activity.
We are looking at a situation where in the last couple of years, 94% of the victims of homicide were high school dropouts. We are looking at a fact that people who are not...
And Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris coming together here, literally and figuratively. And so, just a mess. But anyways, here's this.
They don't want to talk policy. They just want to use propaganda to steal your vote. The left is trying to tout this woman as a savior for the black community, but all she's done is hurt the black community since she came into the game. See, the first step in destroying the black community is to dismantle the black family. So aside from her record as a prosecutor, why don't we ask Mrs. Willie Brown if Kamala Harris cares about black families?
Okay, so that happened, right? So I said this as well. Remember, I don't know if I said it here. I definitely said it to my wife. Photojournalist Zach Roberts, I really thought people were joking about this, but then I photographed him last week. Vance 100% does wear eyeliner. And I said that, right? I was saying that. Did I say this in a video? You guys may or may not remember. I don't remember. Well, I definitely was telling my wife this guy's wearing eyeliner. I think I said in a video when we were doing the, whatever it was. And so there's lots of dudes wearing eyeliner. It's lots of guys, like athletes, and you see it all the time. It's bizarre, right? Women have been sucked into this, where you have to spend hours distorting your appearance, right? That you don't look good enough, so you have to, do all these things with makeup and eyeliner, plastic surgery, Botox, of course, things like that. And now they're trying to rope men in, Machine Gun Kelly selling fingernail paint. And how much time does he spend every day putting that shit on his face, right? You're driving along, suddenly your eyes are confronted with this, what is your reaction? So this person's driving along here, and look at this M&F house. There's the payoffs coming in a second. So there's the giant Trump sign, all this stuff, the Trump, the windows, all this stuff, American flag, and then kaboom, right? Kaboom. There he is. And so Trump save America. Never stop fighting to save America. Again, all this fake stuff and the people buying into this crap, right? Like this staged event. It's just silly. Like the Trumpers are they're worse because Trumpers think they're truthers. I mean, some liberal people think they're woke truthers, but the Trumpers think they're truthers and you're not. Like you're pathetically falling for this flim-flam man. And there's nothing he can do to... I mean, everything he's trying to tell you what a piece of shit he is. He's telling you what a piece of shit he is. And he's doing all these things, and you keep on buying into it, right? I nicked my upper ear cartilage over a month ago with an electric trimmer, clippers while trimming my hair. Here's the thing here. And there's the cut that's still there. So I remembered what it was, and I think I read it in a previous video. All stuff blends together. And I just deleted all my old, comments. And, I get so many files of videos and video clips and things. I have to delete them every once in a while. I've made, I think, over 20 to 30 terabytes of videos over the years, probably over 30. And, I have to move all the stuff over to the stuff I'm going to save over to an external hard drive, and then all these other things. Because even with a 4 terabyte capacity, I can't keep all my video content. And then there's backup files and double video files, all these things, right? But I save these screenshots of comments, and it goes to my desktop, and every once in a while I have to delete that whole folder because it has all these other videos in it. But anyways, there was a comment that I think I had, I think it was a comment form, where the person said that their kid had their ear and they had to tape their ear back together. And they had these thin strips so the ear could breathe. I'm pretty sure I read this in my last video. You guys will remember or not. And, within a month, the thing had completely healed. I mean, it was severe ear damage and lots of blood and these things. And so Trump having no evidence of a cut, I mean, as soon as the Band-Aid came off, then everyone should know it was bullshit, right? As much as, I want to say I was 100% on it, which I was, that was irrefutable evidence because he didn't need that big-ass bandage when he went on to the convention. So, he was milking the thing, right? Like, even if it happened, of course it didn't, he's milking it. So that means that there's deception. He's deceiving all the people. Everyone knows when somebody's overplaying an injury. This thing had no scar. There's no visible damage. And so the guy wasn't hitting the ear. I mean, the guy could have at least had them take a chunk out of his ear. It wouldn't have hurt that bad. People get pierced ears all the time. And for this kind of deception, but he's such a puss, he wouldn't do that. And they're talking about him being a badass and a hero. And the whole thing's hilarious because it's obvious now that he had no damage to his ear and the blood was fake. And we always knew the blood was fake because it dried by the time he stood up. Like, how does blood dry that quickly? And how does some part of your body that's bleeding that much just stop bleeding? And so him claiming there's blood all over the place on his hands. And we all saw the videos and there was none of that. There's no video. There's no blood on anywhere but his ear and his face. And that was dry. And so with blood, it was ketchup or whatever they use for fake blood. Ketchup gate. And so it's so obvious right now. Like, nobody should be. I mean, it's died down. Like, all the, how people were talking about him being a badass and, all the investigations. It's a dead event, right? It's no longer being talked about. There's, whatever. There's going to be no consequences for it. And there's just these people who are diehard Trumpers wearing the T-shirts, and Trump who keeps on bragging about and talking about, even though everyone's looking at his fucking ear and seeing that there's no damage. And it's just ridiculous, like, that anybody would buy into this thing. Because Trump himself has already, like I said, he's already faked you guys by pretending that the cut was worse than it was. He needed no stitches, and there was, he didn't need anything. Like, he went to the hospital for that, like, come on, like, this is, anyways. So Kamala Harris was such a non-existent vice president, right? She would show up and be part of a meme, and they sold her out. I mean, Joe Biden put her in a horrible position when he made her the czar of the border when the border was collapsing. And that was just another way to make her an insurance policy, right? What I mean by that, she was making her unelectable because she was going to be in charge of the most disastrous part of the Biden administration is the immigration issues, right? And he stuck that on her. And so he was making it so people weren't going to say, hey, let's get rid of Biden because they're like, well, we can't have Harris. And now she's the candidate. Like, he screwed her by doing that, and now she's stuck with that border czar term, which they're trying to, scrub. But she, was, most vice presidents are, they're just not covered. They're just not there, right? They're not part of the news cycle. And so I didn't know how her stance on the vax was, right? Well, I figured it would just be what Joe Biden's was. But here's her.
Okay, let's do it. All righty. Ready? Yeah, I'm ready.
Double mask.
That was easy.
I mean, she's got the double mask. Like, she has the, medical mask, and then she has one that goes with her outfit. Yeah, laugh away.
Thank you.
There's no bleeding. I barely felt it. Oh, really? I barely felt it. Awesome. I will put the phone down. And we are all, oh, okay. Awesome. Thank you, Nurse
Woo!
Patricia. Thank you. Well, I want to thank United Medical Center for the work that you do in Southeast D.C.
Okay, so there was that, right? But before that, in a debate with Mike Pence in 2020.
For life to get back to normal, Dr. Anthony Fauci and other experts say that most of the people who can be vaccinated need to be vaccinated. But half of Americans now say they wouldn't take a vaccine if it was released now. If the Trump administration approves a vaccine before or after the election, should Americans take it, and would you take it?
If the public health professionals, if Dr. Fauci, if the doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it. Absolutely. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
Boom. It's the same vaccine, right? It's the same vaccine, right? What are you talking about? Like, it doesn't matter. And they were both saying it, you know, because Trump was the father of that vaccine. Of course, she ended up getting Trump's vaccine. You just saw it, like his Operation Warp Speed. And so this became a big controversy at the time. I didn't hear this. I didn't watch this debate. Remember this frickin' dead corpse ever? Like, he's just not even alive.
President Trump has said that we can't expect a COVID-19 vaccine before the end of the year or, quote, sometime during the month of October. But vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris not so sure when it comes to trusting what President Trump says. Harris says for her to take the vaccine, the information about its safety will have to come from credible sources.
I will not take his word for it. He wants us to inject bleach. No, I will not take his word.
Harris also said...
So there was that, right? Of course she got it, and JoJo Magoo made it mandatory, the whole thing, right? Shamed all the anti-vaxxers. I mean, so, again, they both suck, right? This is an indication of both Trump and Kamala sucking. So here's Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's speaking in Atlanta, and she does that giggle thing.
Georgia.
She does that thing. She makes those sounds. Like a Beavis or Butthead laugh or whatever.
This is home sweet home. This is home. I love you. I love every single one of you.
She does personally.
I tell you what, this feels like a room full of friends and family. Every single one of you. Every single one of you. And Georgia, I really want to talk to you about the serious mission that all of us are on together. This has nothing to do with our skin color, our gender, our politics. It has nothing to do with any of that. This is about our mission with our home state, because let me tell you all.
Well, tell us, sister.
The road to the White House goes directly through the state of Georgia.
Woo! So at some point she goes nuclear on Kamala Harris. That's the title of the video.
And then it all changed. And we watched the Democrats shut this country down and destroy our freedoms over a virus that came from China.
Boo! 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 What am I supposed to do? Boo! Boo!
We watched the Democrats, Kamala Harris herself, support riots in city streets across America, burning, looting, and taking away the rights from Americans.
Boo! Thumbs down. Thumbs down.
Kamala
Everyone thumbs down.
Harris shared a bail bond link to the Minnesota Freedom Fund to put criminal rioters back on the streets that murdered and looted and caused chaos.
Boo! Boo! So, like, the reason that they have dopes like this is because a lot of people are dumb. And they need dopes like this to infuriate the dumb people on the other side and also bring in the dumb people on their side, right? So that's why she exists. Okay, I'm going to show you a guy talking about our national debt, which my wife sent me that video, I think, yesterday. Somebody did. I think she did. And that was like 2 days ago. And so since then, all this other stuff has happened. I've already made the clips you're about to see. And so there are a few more things I want to cover here. First thing is the stock market. This all came just, after lunch. Okay, so it's already started here. Nightmare on Wall Street. Stock market bloodbath sees Dow, NASDAQ plummet as renewed recession fears trigger global sell-off. This is going to kill Kamala Harris and the Joe Biden stuff. Like, they have to answer for this, so it's a nightmare, right? So that happened. And then Doug Emhoff's ex-wife responds after he admits to an affair with Nanny during their marriage. Doug and I have decided to end our marriage for a variety of reasons. One, he banged our nanny, too. He impregnated her many years ago. He is a great father to our kids, continues to be a great friend to me, and I'm really proud of the warm and supportive blended family Doug Kamala have built together. So that's Christina Emhoff. I thought that was the nanny, but there's the nanny there. So that happened. Potential Harris VP pick Josh Shapiro on defense over Israel after decades-old college essay surfaces. Well, we talked about this already, and it seems like he's going to be her VP. It sounds like she's going to pick the VP this week. So I actually have an update. So she's picking him tomorrow. Today's Monday. She's going to Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, his state. And so I think she's picking him. She's announcing it before tomorrow's rally, unless something goes south. And I saw Morning Joe defending this guy. And they had that guy on, Rosenblatt, whatever his name is, who's in charge of the Anti-Defamation League. And they were talking about how everybody hates the guy, because the guy has said Netanyahu's the worst prime minister in Israeli history. But those are just words, right? And they're saying that he's being unfairly prejudiced against because he's Jewish, but the guy said some, horrible things about the Palestinians. He worked with I think part of the reason Kamala's picking this guy is that they're weak on Israel, her and Joe Biden, or at least that's what is being said, right? But I don't see how this guy helps her, right? We'll get into that more tomorrow. But they need the useful vote, and Trump is going to get some of the Jewish vote because Trump was so great for Israel. And so I don't understand the pick here. And, they're whining about this thing about being, that everyone just hates Jewish people, but this isn't about that. I mean, to some extent, maybe it is. But for most people, I have a problem with it. If they're calling him Genocide Josh because the guy really supported Israel and said horrible things about the Palestinians in that essay that surfaced, where he said the Palestinians were incapable of ruling themselves and a two-state solution was not possible because the Palestinians suck, right? And he was over the top in his support of Israel, and it's a genocide. And the fact that people can't see that, or, these people who are just shills for Israel, that there's a lot of young people really upset about this. And those people who voted for Joe Biden, a lot of those people would vote for him or did vote for him. They're not voting for Kamala because of this issue, right? I don't see how this guy helps him. Or helps her. Whatever the case may be. All right, let's get into the economy here.
Mr. Speaker, and to my friend from Missouri, thank you. Actually, sometimes I come behind these microphones, and often what I want to share, what I need to share, it's my therapy, is a bit dour. And it's sometimes fun to listen to someone that actually has happy and joyous. All right, now that the uplifting portion of this program is over, let's get to the facts. Mr. Speaker, or now Madam Speaker Pro Tem, you see the number, 35 trillion. Guess when we hit it? We should be very, very excited and proud of ourselves. We did something that so many economists said we would never get to this quick. My math says this coming Friday, 3 p.m., the United States gross debt will cross over 35 trillion.
We did it.
Now understand, that's not the way Europeans calculate our debt, which they calculate our debt dramatically higher because of our obligated unfunded liabilities.
Okay, let me show you that, what he's talking about. So we passed it. Now we're at 35 trillion, 132 billion already. So that was July 25th that he was saying it. So that was, I guess, 2 Fridays ago. Was that what it is? But now, it's here. And so we're at 35 trillion. We're already 1/9 of a way to 36 trillion since he said that. But here are the unfunded liabilities, right? These are all the things to do with things that we have to pay out. And we're at 217 trillion that we have to pay these out, and we have no way of paying them. They're not a part of the budget. There's no money for them. Social Security being one of the big ones, and Medicare, right? Between those two, that's at over around $70 trillion. And then there's just all these other things that are there. These are things that, some of this is military industrial complex, because this is our income. This is the tax revenue, which is way up. It hadn't crossed 4 before, and now it's close to 5. But, there's all these other things here, like the U.S. total debt was $100 trillion. And then we have the derivatives market here, which is at $629 trillion. Of course, that's just all, that's credit default swaps and all these types of things that your financial crimes, financial scams to bet against debt, right? Debt's already bad, but now you're betting against people's ability to pay things. And so that's the credit default swaps, all those things, right? Which now we know the economy's collapsing. In Japan, which had happened last time, the credit default swaps got involved in these things. But this is not sustainable. Whether you're Kamala Harris fan or you're Trump fan or you're independent or you're a Kennedy voter, whatever you think you're doing here, nobody can fix this. We don't have $35 trillion. The gross domestic national product, I think, is it globally or just for America, is like $20 trillion. So the global GDP is over $100 trillion, right? In 2022, it goes up a little bit every year. And so that is, gross domestic product. That's not net profit. That's just the gross, right? Without taking out expenses. America's GDP in 2023 was $27 trillion. So even the gross domestic product, and again, this is all monies. This isn't tax money. This is what the money that's taxed is, right? The taxes on this money. And that's still not as much as this number. Certainly not as much as this number. And nothing's as much as this number here, the derivatives market, right? So these unfunded liabilities, $217 trillion. Total U.S. debt, $101 trillion. $35 trillion, soon to be 36. And this is the amount of income, and all this money is accounted for. All this money, every tax dollar you pay, that's why there's debt, right? So all the tax money that is paid isn't enough to cover our budget. And then there's the unfunded liabilities and the interest on the debt. And so there's no way to reverse this, right? The only way to reverse this is to totally devalue the dollar, and so that you're getting paid $1 trillion an hour. And then there'd be enough money to pay off this debt, because the debt becomes watered down because there's inflation, right? That's the only way, is to devalue the dollar, so the $1 trillion isn't that much money. If you're paying $1 million for a loaf of bread, then we could pay down the debt. Of course, the economy would collapse by then. And so there's there's nothing here.
But you're going to watch the Treasury Friday about 3 p.m. post up a number, $35 trillion. We did it. Congratulations. And how many people have you heard come find the microphone today or this week, understanding, wanting to talk about that? What we've gotten is people coming behind the microphone and not telling the truth. We all want to protect Social Security. The way you protect Social Security is you know the math and how it actually works.
There's no math. There's no math. Like, there's no math for this. This is, an issue where the math, like if you're an individual person who has a budget, and this is your debt, and this is your income, and this is your real debt here of 101 trillion, but really this is also your debt, and this is the debt that you're not even thinking about, which is the derivatives market, right? I mean, the unfunded liabilities. You can't pay. Social Security is gone. That money's gone. It's broke. It's defunct, right? They know it. You can't save it. Can't be saved. And Medicare as well. They can't pay for your insurance, and they just want those people to die anyway, right? They can't. All these promises they made for you, the promise of America, the promise of your lifestyle, the promise of these things is gone. I'll cover this a little bit. Let me go to this last thing here, and I'll come back with a voiceover. And I got 2 more spiritual segments here.
This is insane. Look at there's even more now.
So there was hundreds of these big giant dragonflies in our field yesterday. But dragonflies have been sort of my well, let me just play this here.
Holy crap, look at this. Oh my god, look at the swarm over here. Holy I've never seen anything like this in my life. Oh my.
So that's crazy, right?
My God. Crazy.
So one of my viewers sent me this, I think on Instagram. And what was interesting for me was that we've had a ton of dragonflies this year. So last year, I noticed there was some dragonfly nymphs in our small little pond that I built. We have this little sort of pond that, I have a video that's on my members channel I'm waiting to put up here. I just have such a backlog of videos, and it's like 2 months old now, but it shows a little bit of the pond. But I have, all these interesting interactions with wildlife. We had orioles that were bathing in the pond, all these different birds, and then frogs, and we have turtles in the bigger pond. We have all this stuff out here. And I built this little, waterfall pond area. And last year there was these nymphs, and I've studied them. Like, they fascinated me that they are really, aggressive predators, which I'd seen before. I'd seen some on some nature show. And, we have these little minnows. We have little fish in there. And they're really aggressive predators. And then my wife said she was reading, like this was probably about 6 months later, that the dragonfly is the second best predator in terms of its kill rate. It has like a 99% kill rate. If it targets a creature, either on water or in the air, it gets that creature 99% of the time. They're very vicious predators. And the only creature to beat it are those sea turtles that eat jellyfish. Right? Like, it's hard to miss on a jellyfish. And so I thought that was really interesting. So I just looked it up. Dragonflies have a 97% success rate. Like, I don't know if anybody's been bitten by one. I haven't, but they're just scary looking, right? They're just, they kill like wasps and all kinds of bugs. Now, I don't know if this has to do with the cicadas, but I've never seen so many dragonflies this year. And on my birthday area, when I was working on the farm, I wanted to do one of our projects that was just sort of lingering. And also, my wife had just read something about like putting bamboo stakes. We have these orange stakes that we put up so I don't run stuff over. But the dragonflies land on them, and they're great for eating bugs in your garden, and certainly mosquitoes and other flying insects. So they're kind of a neat thing. But they were, as I was cutting I was bush hogging and doing things in the pasture, and as I was doing it, these dragonflies were just flying like with me. There's one time I came up on a tree and I thought I hit a wasp nest because like a couple hundred dragonflies came pouring out of this tree while I was driving, this little sort of shrub I was bush hogging. And they were flying like with me, like almost keeping me company. I believe in this idea of spirit animals, kind of as a goof, as a fun thing. But, this stuff with druids and the Native Americans had these animals that would be their spirit guide. And I really felt these dragonflies were around for a reason, like I had so many around me. And then just the other night, I was walking around the pasture. My wife was coming home late. And I took a video and I sent it to her. And there was just all these dragonflies flying around. It was like dusk. And there was hundreds of these really big ones. There's various variations of them. But anyways, it must mean something. This is a dragonfly summer. So there's not really much more to say about the economy. I've covered this in so many videos over the years. And, people should know the numbers just don't add up, right? Because if you're adding $3 million of debt every minute and you have $35 trillion in debt, that's each $1 trillion is $1,000 billion, right? 1 trillion is $1,000 billion, right? So, it's an astronomical amount of money. A billion's $1,000 million. And our budget is so crazy that our $4 trillion, $5 trillion amount of tax revenue is already spoken for. And then there's all these other outstanding debts, right? So that's, once you look at the numbers, once I realized the numbers, the system is insolvent. It's just that we're all dependent on it. And no one wants to admit what's going on here. But the numbers are just, so whack. It's impossible for America to get out of debt, right? America should declare bankruptcy. That's how this should go, right? America should declare bankruptcy. I mean, many times over. But who would absorb all that loss, right? So that debt that $35 trillion worth of debt is being traded back and forth, and whatever the way debt is, who is this owed to, right? Who is the $35 trillion owed to? Who does America owe $35 trillion to, right? And if you default on that debt, the whole economy spins out globally. So, we're on borrowed time, and it should have collapsed years ago once people realized how fucked we are. And if somebody like me knows, then all the people who are, economists and people who look into this realize, oh yeah, this is completely effed up, right? This can't be, right? It just can't be. The silver lining here is once the system collapses, then all the evil goes with it. In terms of the control of the system and all the ickiness of the system, and people have to start from scratch. And whatever that means, it's going to suck, but at least the nightmare of the system will be done. The other, I don't want to call it a silver lining, but the other possible good thing is it should have collapsed years ago, but they've kept it going. So who knows how much longer they can keep it going. But it isn't forever, right? It isn't, something they can sustain forever, but for now they can. So I got this great comment, and let me just pull it up here. I have one more spiritual thing to say here about religion. But here we go. The person writes, this is to my Embrace the Chosen One part and Band-Aid Gate, something, whatever. You screwed up the whole presentation and mistakenly asserting that Ben Carson is a religious figure or pastor. And, someone saying you screwed up, it's just you're a piece of boop, because mistakes are going to be made, right? Are you congratulating me for the many times that I'm right? The many times I say things that are, have value or profound, which is, the videos, most of my stuff is accurate, right? With whatever, some things are factual, but in terms of my assertions and, all these things. So any person like this is a worthless piece of crap, right? Because they're looking for some flaw, and I don't care about this. So, and neither does most of my viewers. But this isn't about me, it's about the person. Because when you write something like you screwed up, like some person wrote, hey asshole, but those are hostile people. There's a person who likes my videos. You screwed up the whole presentation by mistakenly asserting that Ben Carson is a religious figure or pastor. Well, he is a religious figure. Maybe not a pastor, he's a doctor. And then the person writes, he is a famous neurosurgeon in capital letters. Where have you been? I am not a pop culture person. In fact, you are more into pop culture than me, but not knowing who Carson is really hurts your awareness of those geopolitical arena. Ben Carson is one of the main Republican presidential candidates in 2016. Ben Carson is basically another Ron Paul figure. So if I was to send this video to my family and friend who buy this staged event, they would turn it off when you misidentify Carson as a religious figure. They would think, who the hell is this Paul guy? If he does not have a clue who Ben Carson is, then he must really have his head up his ass. I don't give a fuck about you or your fucking family, right? And your dopey family who are Republicans and can't figure this out for themselves, right? I'm not making videos so you can wake up your family. I don't give a shit about you or your family. And so saying something like this is, again, I have policies about this, that this is not a complaint department. I obviously made a mistake, and I remember now that he's a neurosurgeon, but I cover so many of these dopey people that I don't care about. I don't care about pop culture or politics. I don't care about any of this stuff. As I say quite significantly in the spiritual parts of this particular video, people are completely wired to look for negative, dramatic. They like drama. They like the negative. They like the lower vibrational crap. They don't like the higher. They don't embrace their higher nature, and they don't want to hear about spiritual principles, and they don't want to hear that they have to change. And these are all things I have to offer people. And so offer this idea that God is inside of you, which people don't give a shit about, don't want to hear about. I have to make videos about things people care about. I've talked about this extensively. And, I've come to enjoy mocking it at least, but I don't care about it. Like, I wouldn't tune into this stuff if I didn't make videos. I wouldn't watch any of it. I mean, for entertainment, sure. If I was going to make fun of it, me and my wife were watching something, we were joking about it, I would watch the Biden-Trump debate, but I don't care about any of these people. Ben Carson doesn't mean anything. He's stupid, and, he is... I remember the debates with Trump years and years ago, 2016, and I knew he was Dr. Ben Carson. It just slipped my mind. I, for whatever reason, thought he was because he's so always talking about Christian stuff. I thought for some reason he was a preacher, and now I remember he's kind of a preacher. I mean, when you hear him talking, he talks a lot more about God and Christianity than he does about his work as a doctor. But either way, I made a mistake with, because I didn't remember something. It wasn't really a mistake. I cover all these people all the time. It's amazing that I can remember all that I do, right? I mean, I have a very good memory. And as I gotten older, I'm sure it's not as good as it used to be. But it's one of my assets here. But I don't care about it. Like, it's a meaningless mistake. Like, it doesn't matter to me whether it's a preacher or a doctor, whatever. And if your dopey family can't get over the fact and realize that I'm telling them something beyond their consciousness level, and if you can't get over the fact, then, you're not welcome here. I don't care. I'm not you're not doing me a favor. You're not helping me out. I don't care if you wake up your dopey family, right? I'm not here to wake up dopes, right? I make content for people on a higher level of consciousness, and it isn't that high, but at least people who can understand things on a different level. I don't make content for QB dopes and dopes like you and dopes like your Republican family. This is not my thing. I'm not here to wake up dopes, right? I made this perfectly clear. If you guys come here and you're stretching your abilities and you're trying to, reach up to a higher level of understanding of things, great, you're welcome. But realize there's a higher thing here. There's so much content out there for dumbasses, right? The majority of content, TV shows and movies and things, it's just for remedial people with remedial consciousness and double-digit IQs. And, they have all that shit, right? There's plenty of shit about Republican stuff and pro-religious, pro-Christian stuff, and I don't go to those people and insult them and, tell them they made a mistake here or there or whatever. I don't care. Like, they have their thing, right? That's their thing. And it's great that people have their thing, right? I'm not even trying to categorize this like as smarter people being better than than dumber people, but there's just so much stuff out there for dumb people. And so the little stuff that's there, and I don't even mean dumb, I mean people who are on a lower evolutionary path and are, binary thinkers and, who aren't just able to reach up to higher levels of consciousness, right? And so there's very little out there for gifted people or people who could aspire to be spiritual and aspire to, get out of the rut of the, the mundane masses, right? The masses of people who are, emotionally based and, aren't looking to pull themselves up to a higher level. They're not looking to connect to God, divinity within them, and all these other things. And so those people know it doesn't matter whether I thought Ben Carson was a doctor or a preacher. Because like what you said, what this guy said in his comment, let me pull this thing back up here. Let me see where this is here. I think it's here. He says, so if I send this video to my family and a friend who buy this staged event, they would turn it off when you misidentify Carson as a religious figure. Like the dopes that buy this as that event, you're sending them to this, you're sending my video to them because it's great, right? Other than this one mistake that you're bitching about, the thing is good, right? The video is good and my points are valid. And so, again, they're dumbasses. They bought into the event, right? Like I said this over and over again, there's going to be a high level of population reduction. There's going to be, 7/8 of the population or more, 7 out of 8 people, or maybe even a higher rate, right? 1 out of 10 are going to die. And there's only going to be so many available spots for people to reincarnate into this planet. Those of us who don't escape with a, to a higher level of, don't free ourselves from our earthly bondage. This is something I wholeheartedly believe. And so only the people who are, if there's going to be a redemptive movement and there's some sort of spiritual plan, which I believe there is, to, bring human beings up to a higher level of consciousness, the dumbasses aren't going to be allowed back in. Evil people and dumbasses and the rest of this, right? They're not going to be allowed to be brought back in. So, if people can't, I'm obliged to give people the information that I have to give to you. And I do it willingly, right? And it's up to you to rise up to it, right? And your dopey family, it's not my concern. They would say, if I send this to my family and friend who buy this stage event, they would turn it off when you misidentify Carson as a religious figure. They would think, who the hell is this Paul guy? If he does not have a clue who Ben Carson is, then he must really have his head up his ass. Well, don't get on Noah's Ark, you dumbasses. I don't care, right? Like, good. Like, I hope they fail. I'm obligated to give this information and pass it forward. It's my God-given duty. But it's up to, this is a you problem. You and your dopey family and you and your inability to get over the fact that I, couldn't remember he was a neurosurgeon, because that means nothing to the context of what I'm saying, right? I would have liked to get it right, but I know I'm not going to get everything right. I talk all the time and there's all these people. I can't remember everything about them. Sometimes I take the time to look it up, but I make these long videos. There's going to be some mistakes. If you can't get over the mistakes, they're going to be a problem for you, then you can Seinfeld your way out of here. Like when Seinfeld was breaking up with a girl because she ate peas one at a time, right? You can always find some little flaw, some, seeming mistake to dismiss something. You can always dismiss something. If you're looking to dismiss something, you will. And so I was right about the thing. Your family isn't, and, sucks to be them, right? Anyways, let's get into the end of the spiritual stuff that I was saying here. So I want to add something here, about what I was talking about in the introduction to the video about Christianity and people's approach to God and spirituality as an evolutionary step from religion. And when people take personal responsibility, spiritual responsibility for their actions, and have to answer to their soul and God when you do something, before you do it, like not after you do it, where there's a redemption, but before, you have to bow before God and ask permission to do something. Think about doing that for everything that you do. Praying to God and asking God sincerely with, sense of subjectivity and looking for the signs that are going to allow you to do what is to is wrong for you to do, right? Looking for things to confirm for you, oh yeah, God wants me to do this, even though it certainly doesn't. Like, you know it's wrong, and you're just looking for confirmation to validate your choice of doing the wrong thing. So when you say that Jesus is died for your sins, and you don't have to take personal responsibility to connect to God and ask God's permission to do anything, and then you can just rearrange the dogma to validate like these things where manifest destiny and things like that, where you say we're God's, the Queen of England's, King of England wearing a scepter, carrying a scepter and having an orb that represents that they're God's representative on earth, and they can do whatever the fuck they want because whatever they do is divine, right? That's just some bullshit thing to do. People believe in that religion is the only real religion, and therefore anything a religion does is, divinely manifested. And there's no religion. There's no one religion. There's no right religion. There's God and you getting right with God internally. Each person individually. It happens on an individual basis, right? And so when you take responsibility for yourself, connecting to God, and that you have to include God in your soul and decision makings, when your ego submits to that process, you inevitably become better and better at making decisions. Like some pastor that, cheats on his wife and has to come before them and does all kinds of, gets involved in gambling or, has, gay lovers or whatever it is. Some pastor that comes in front of their, one of these TV evangelists and has to beg for forgiveness, crying, Lord, I'm a sinner. I'm always a sinner. My nature is to be weak. All those are just excuses, right? That's all bullshit, right? You have to hold yourself accountable as an ego, right? That your ego is potentially going to want to do the wrong things, is inevitably going to want to do the wrong things. And you can check that out by connecting to God and making thoughtful decisions and heart-based decisions, including your soul and God. And when you do that, you're always going to make the right decision. Because the right decision is easy to figure out. It's just not what you want to do, right? You want to do what you want to do, right? That's always been the problem of humanity. And if you had such people, again, just one or two generations of this, you having a couple of lives engaging in this process, and you'd be a society of Jesuses, right? Everyone on Jesus's level, or beyond that, or beyond his level, right? A society full of saints and higher developed souls, and there'd be no question of all these egotistical and selfish decisions, entitled decisions, these things, because you wouldn't have those qualities or characteristics, and you would include God in all that you do, everything that you do, and therefore you would do the right thing. You would be on the divine path, right? It's not that hard to do if you want to do it. It just takes effort. And I'm speaking for myself and everyone else who's engaged in this process, right? I mean, failure comes from an unwillingness, right? As long as you're willing, then you'll do the right thing, right? It's the unwillingness, your ego not willing to submit to this process, right? And so all of these problems that you see, all the shit I cover here, all these lowlifes, who are embracing the egotistical path, and all these failed religions, because people aren't connecting to God. The religions are here to elevate you to a higher level, and they're not doing that because they're here for their own selfish, evil profit and things or whatever. And so the religions, more than anything else, the failure of these religions, doing the exact opposite, disconnecting people from God, is the problem. Like, you remove that, you remove the failure of religions, you remove the selfishness of people, you have people who have a real internal relationship with God. And with that, it's evolving, like generations of people doing that, and it gets better and better. People get more and more refined in their levels of consciousness and their decision making, and all this shit disappears. All the low life shit, all the all the addictions, all the deviant behaviors, all the selfish stuff, all the murders, all these things, right? All that stuff disappears, right? You have not maybe a utopia, but you have, there'll still be problems and things, but not problems of human creation. Humans are all working towards doing the right thing. Maybe everyone's going to make mistakes, but not the mistakes that we're making now, right? And so all that, all the, the scams, all the, the debt-based economic system, all the ways that people have of hurting each other, hurting themselves, hurting the planet, and doing things that, instead of doing what's best for everybody, like if they can replace gasoline with water, they don't, the oil industry and the car industry doesn't destroy and kill the people inventing these inventions, things like that, right? Things that'll make the world better will actually be embraced, and doing the right thing will be encouraged or be just what everybody does, right? And so that's what I'm talking about here, and that's what has to happen. And this religion suck. I mean, the religions are keeping people down. You can trace back to these religious ideas that I've said, this idea that you're a sinner, this idea that, just in terms of Christianity, but all of them. You can trace back their faulty beliefs and the corruption of the religion to the the people disconnected from God and becoming more selfish and being more egotistical. Like this is a parallel. This is this is where it all starts, right? With the failure of religion to help people to find the divinity within them. And so the future of humanity is based in, this is why I say only spirituality will save this world, is based in these principles. And that's not my quote. That comes from the second master of the Sajmark system. And it's true because only elevated souls, you have to change the problem, which is the people being selfish and sucky, right? People suck right now. We all see it. We all can see it. There's some good things. We all have good qualities, and there's good things about people. But overall, people suck, and it's, we're going in the wrong direction. And an internal connection with God is the solution to that. And so that's why I'm saying all these things. And it's, fundamentally, fundamental principle and fundamental part of our whole evolution. So I'm going to include this in my 154th edition of my Journey series. These 3 talks. We'll start off but this is, this is the need of the time, right? As our system collapses and, having these false prophets and, there needs to be a cleansing of the lack of willingness of the people who are unwilling to rise to a higher level. Like, this is what has to happen. Everybody individually and collectively has to go to a higher level. And if we're not willing to do that, then, it's the end of humanity. So there has to be some sort of intervention and change here. And so these religions are going to go by the wayside anyway, because they're the biggest part of the problem. If the solution is everyone connecting to God and their soul internally, then the religions are the biggest part of the problem, because they're preventing that from happening and discouraging it and not even allowing you to understand that you can do that, right? And so, this is just the need of the day. Okay, so one more thing I want to add here. So any religion, any spiritual organization, anybody who teaches about God, the idea that God's inside of you, that God has to be inside of you, that God created you, God's your creator, right? You were created by God, and you have a soul that has manifested your body. Anybody who believes in a soul, the soul is what animates your life. It creates your physical form, and without your soul, you no longer exist. I talked about seeing my grandfather's dead body, and his soul was gone, and he wasn't there. My grandfather wasn't there anymore. When you see a dead person, the soul is no longer in the person, and so they're just a dead body. It's not like they're sleeping. Their soul is gone. Their essence is gone. So when you understand that principle, that means that God's inside of you. Why would God want to punish himself? Why would God punish something that's inside of, the part of him that's inside of you, right? The other part of that is then everything you do is being recorded by your soul. Like, your soul, in a sense, is ratting you out, ratting your ego out, but that's, a bad way to look at it, because your ego is the one that's doing the wrong thing, right? And so your soul's there accounting for everything that your ego chooses to do. And so there's no sense of getting away with anything, because God's inside of you, watching you all the time. There's divinity, there's a divine system. So that means the idea that you have to punish other people, or you have to, wish that something bad happens to them because they suck, that no longer should be a thing, because you know that God's already on it, right? Because God's inside of them, and there's a system, accountability system, and it might not be in something that you're going to see in this life, but it's there, right? The soul knows that everything that your ego does, it's going to have to pay for. You gave the example of Tuesday Paul screwing over Thursday Paul, right? How we all do things in the past, or we're doing things now in the present that we'll have to pay for later on, right? We're screwing ourselves over, and we're doing things now that can benefit us later on, right? Doing different things now, making better choices in terms of what we eat and what we exercise and our lifestyle and the people we hang out with, and everything that we do can either hurt us later on or help us later on, right? Based on our intentions and our decisions. And so that's happening all the time, where you're making choices as an ego that you're going to have to pay for later on, right? Some future version of yourself is going to have to pay for. So why would God violate that system and say, oh, my son died for your sins? It's silly. It's just goofy. Like I said, it's a great deal, but you can't get that kind of deal. That deal doesn't exist. That deal doesn't freaking exist, right? And so this is like all you need to know about the divine system is that God's inside of you and monitoring you and is aware of everything that you're doing, and the good, bad, the ugly. And there's a system where there's consequences for your decisions. And the ones that you make in terms of, this idea of some scars I've talked about in my spiritual videos, impressions you form, it could be like an addiction, it could be a talent, it could be any number of things, right? But these impressions are what make you have to live a future life. And if you're free of these impressions, you can move on to the next stage. You're liberated from the captivity, being earthbound, being trapped on earth, right? In a never-ending series of incarnations. But when you do things with the idea that God's doing them, and you're doing them as a joint enterprise, where you and God are working together and you're following your soul's path and God's lead on everything that you do and decide, then you don't create some scars, right? You're free from any spiritual burden or consequences because you're doing God's bidding. And so, mature people hearing that, even myself included, people who know about this and believe in it, still will make the bad choices, right? And it just shows you the problem with people, right? Because even when it's, this stuff to be true, that there's consequences for your actions, and the best way to negate that is to just figure out what God wants you to do and do it. People still won't do that, right? And that's the human problem, the problem with the human condition right now. So that's going to have to change in the future, or there will be no people, because it's gotten to the extent that we're now a threat to the planet and we're going in the wrong direction, and there needs to be some sort of intervention. So that's what all this stuff is happening. It's coming to a head, and we have a chance for redemption here. And the redemption is like what I said before, connecting with God and doing what God wants you to do, right? Anyways, I just want to add this little caveat. No, this is a little bit of a whatever this is.